Inside the minds of dangerous criminals, their crimes and sides of the story. My dad was a cook for my entire life. I learned everything I knew about cooking from him. He used to be a pilot. He had a pilot's license, he had all the gear, everything. I never questioned it. One day while we were working together, it kind of popped into my head that I never knew why my dad was a pilot. Did he fly commercially? For fun? Who knows? I asked him and he candidly gave me a nice account of his life. You see, he had used to fly white snow and weapons out of the Carolinas into New York. Then he showed me his leg where he'd been shot during a takeoff when they'd done a deal and they opened fire on the plane as he left because they thought they'd gotten screwed. He told me that when my mother was pregnant with me, that his substance people wanted him to work down in Cancun with them because they were opening a club. They had all the permits, they had the contracts, all of it paid off in substance and weapons money. My dad made the choice not to move to Cancun with me, as he wanted me to grow up in New York instead. His friends eventually opened the club and everything went great for them. They kept asking my dad to come down and be their chef. They'd pay for everything. They were making a ton of money. Eventually, the club was raided, and it turns out all the permits they'd gotten were part of a sting from the Mexican government. They'd known the people who were opening the club were dealers, and they were simply waiting for them to pool all of their connections in one place. Everyone was arrested and sent to prison. Some of them didn't even get out until the 2000s. I basically found out that both of my parents were doing white snow themselves. Never would have guessed it, to be honest. My dad didn't regret it, and he said that he still did it for fun about once a month. He stopped when a friend of his died suddenly of a heart attack after doing a bump and opening a bottle of beer in a bar. My father eventually passed away from kidney cancer. I miss him every day, of course. He gave me my love of science and an education. Gave me my appreciation of good quality food, too. My sense of humor as well. I look just like him. And now I am tearing up. My ex-boss hounded me for 2 weeks about finding him an ounce of some green herb. One day he said that he had back problems and he really needed something. I felt sorry for him, so I was able to find him an ounce of some bud and I sold it to him. 3 days short of a year later, I was arrested and charged with a felony. I don't sell the stuff, I'm not a dealer. I was able to pinpoint the only time I've ever sold anything to anyone. Now I'm stuck with a Class D felony for distribution of Mary J. It frickin' sucks, man. Apparently if they'd waited a full year, the evidence would have been null and void. I really wish I could have been out of state at the time. My ex-boss was a confidential informant of the local police department to where they had a private investigator take pictures of me mid-deal. That sucks. Really narc move of your former boss. I mean, you weren't a dealer to begin with, and he knew that. So he what? He guilted you into doing the only actual crime you'd ever done with a tearjerker story and then got you? What the heck was he getting out of this? Cop cred for taking down a problem he created? This is entrapment, right? I am technically guilty of murder. My dad had Lou Gehrig's disease, and I helped him get a high dose of Nembutal. We kept it for a couple of months until he stopped basically being able to communicate. Eventually, he was losing control of his hands, but he really wanted to take the stuff himself. So, we mixed it with some porridge, it goes down easier, and he took some antiemetics over the course of the day. Then, in the evening, he ate the porridge with the crazy green stuff in it, and he died. Where I live, this is murder. My dad was dying, though, with no possible hope of a cure. He couldn't speak, he choked constantly, he could barely sleep, and by the end he could only use 2 of his fingers. His life was hell. He didn't want to live and had said it would get to that point from the moment he was diagnosed. One of his parents had also died in the same way. I regret nothing, by the way. I'm just thankful it's not the known genetic form. I had a plan to off my mother, but I never went through with it. The story is that she was a smack addict that cleaned up her life and had actually become a substance and alcohol counselor when I went to live with her when I was 14. By the time I was 16, she had started to overuse prescription meds and our relationship was getting increasingly bad. She'd keep me up at night being loud and on something. Sometimes she'd wake me up at random times to cry and tell me she wanted to not be alive anymore, that her life was miserable, and she'd apologize for being such a crappy mum. And then, in the morning, she'd grab me by the ankle and pull me out of bed, yelling the whole time about how stupid I was and how ungrateful I was and how I was such a terrible kid. Looking back, it was a textbook domestic mistreatment of your kid. One second she was telling me she was the only person who actually loved me, then the next tearing me down and telling me I wasn't anything, that I shouldn't go to college. She tried to convince me not to go to school or work or to hang out with my friends. She threw things at me, shoved me around, and would block the door when I tried to leave the room rather than fight with her. After months of escalating behavior, not being able to sleep at night, not having any food in the house except when I'd buy it, I just snapped. I started to plan her faked self-deletion. I was going to feed her every pill in her pill box. It was literally a 10-gallon Tupperware filled with pill bottles. The reason I didn't end up trying it is actually because other people tried to get her before and it didn't work. Also, I wasn't really sure how I was going to get her to take all of those pills without showing evidence of a struggle. Eventually, I broke down and told my best friend what was going on. She immediately told her parents, and I went to live with her until I went to college. I attacked many people at night. There was a lot of the unspeakable act happening along the paths that follow the river through my town. I used to watch The Dark Knight and do smack and then go out looking for trouble. I got into a very serious altercation when the guy was essentially ready for me one time. I hit him in the face with a big branch and pushed him into the river. But he had been following this girl for about half an hour. I watched and waited patiently. I mean, that's kind of freaking awesome. Dope man. But seriously though, you could have died. Which is why I don't do it anymore. I was half proud and half ashamed that I did it, but I seriously don't F around with R-wordists. This other guy I know pulled that crap and we stopped him at an intersection, ripped him out of his car and beat him within an inch of his life. He moved to Texas the next week. It gets me so mad. About 13 years ago, my sister, a teen at the time, started dating her first boyfriend. That kid was 19. He was completely obsessed, he'd verbally say and send things to her that wrecked her self-esteem, stuff like that. As far as I know, his bullying never got physical, but after she broke up with him, he'd creep around our parents' house, call the house at 3 a.m. just to hang up and threaten her. He pretty much managed to get me mad. So, said gentleman worked at a driving school where he corrected test quizzes after hours. I drove there one evening with a friend to give him one last warning. He told me to F off or he'd call the cops. So my friend and I took out my friend's aluminium baseball bat from the trunk, tuned up the kid's car a bit, and when he came outside, took one good swing at his legs. Then I told him he could call the cops now. He never did. The phone calls stopped, and I never saw him again. Not quite a dramatic story, but it's all I've got. I broke into my old primary school when I was around 18. I say broke in, I put my hand through the letterbox and turned the door handle. It was one of those safety doors that could only be opened from the inside. I then stole a few hundred elastic bands and ate all of the biscuits in the staff room. Like a rebel. Yeesh, man. Thug life. My family has about 700 acres about an hour south of where we live. I drive down there about 2 times every month in the fall and winter to hunt deer, dove, and quail. Last winter I drove down and pulled back onto the back of the property. I equipped myself with my .40 sidearm and I slung on my .30-06. I like to walk the property because I think it's easier to sneak up on the wildlife than having a 4x4 scaring them off. I was walking around the property when I walked out of some trees and I see a truck with 2 guys sitting on the tailgate with hunting weapons and beers. I walked up to them very nicely and casually. They look at me and ask like, "How's it going?" I said, "Fine, but why are you guys here?" They mumble a few words and then ask me the same question. I respond, "Well, my family and I own this ranch." Then they look confused for a second and then one of them grabs his gun and proceeds to chamber it. I turn and start running my butt off into the woods. I hear 2 shots fired off in my general direction. I drop to the ground behind some brush, grab my .30-06, I chamber it, look through my scope and point it at the motherfricker who I think shot at me. I aim at his upper leg. I was about 75 yards away and a .30-06 shot at that distance would tear someone up. I fired and I heard a terrifying cry. I got up and hoofed it back to my car and called the sheriff. They came out and I reported the trespassers and told the sheriff the whole story. About 2 days later, the one guy gets arrested at a local hospital for a bullet wound to the hip. He now has to walk with a cane for the rest of his life because he tried to unalive me and I wouldn't let him. For some reason in my first read-through, I assumed you were a kid or something for some reason. Not sure why. Why on earth would your first instinct when you're caught out on someone's land to be just open fire on the owner? Even if it works, how is that less problematic than just leaving? The guy can only blame himself. I once beat the crap out of my neighbor for bullying my brother and being a creep to my sisters. He had 4 inches and 40 pounds on me and I still won. He went to the hospital and I went home to tell my dad what happened. I got high fives and taken out for ice cream. I don't care. The cops knew. A man tried to mug me and I proceeded to beat the ever-loving crap out of him for it. It was a fight or flight reflex and my instant, unthinking reaction was to go completely berserk. I kind of blacked out and I had to be pulled off the guy and his whole face was bloody and he was unconscious. I got arrested and questioned and the police eventually let me go because he decided not to press charges. My reaction was above and beyond acceptable force, hence the possibility of me being charged with a crime. Honestly, I don't regret it. Maybe the mother fricker will think twice before he approaches a 5'2" woman and thinks he can scare her into turning over what little money she has. You can submit your own stories to be featured here on the channel. The story submission link is in the description below. Don't forget to subscribe to Am I the Genius? Vandal and arson. The neighbor down the street from us took my dog from us. She was a little older than a puppy and very sweet. One night our doggo tunneled out from our backyard and I had to run after her. I thought she was in some bushes, but I was wrong. I was crouching in these bushes looking for her when I saw my neighbor's minivan run her down. They backed up, hit her again, backed up, and ran over her once more before they left. For some reason, I didn't feel like telling my parents because that was a bad story. It was better to just say she didn't suffer and that it was quick. In the meantime, I was breaking their sprinkler system, and I sprinkled weed killer on their yard so that the grass and flowers turned brown. They had 4 cars, and I broke all of their windows and stole all of their radios. I had no idea how to steal radios, so it turned out horrible. I ruined their wood paneling. The car alarms went off, but nobody came out. I carefully stuck nails into their yard by the ladder, by the recycling bin, and by the sprinkler timer so there'd be a greater chance of one of them stepping onto the nails. They installed cameras by the house, so I didn't want to risk going inside. When they installed the new glass windows, I broke them again and I set fire to the inside. It didn't feel like anything to me. It was boring. I should have left my poor dog on their pillow to remind them of what they did. I should have taken their miniature poodles and dropped them off at the Humane Society several towns over. I should have taken a knife to all their furniture and left pictures of dead dogs in every room of that house. I should have poured animal blood in their bedrooms and filled all of their orange juice and milk with blood. But that requires energy I don't have. Plus, where the heck are you going to get all of that blood? I'm not a psychopath. A number of years ago, I was at a party, heavily liquored up, when all of a sudden a fight broke out. When I noticed one of my friends was getting beat up, I jumped in to save him, and thus got the crap kicked out of me by a number of juiced-up gentlemen. In the midst of the chaos and between consciousness and drunkenness, I managed to get the pocket knife out of my pocket, and I latched on to the nearest mother fricker I could get my hands on. I ended up on the back of the biggest guy and I slashed him up real good. He made it to the hospital to get stitches and, rather than press charges, declared a vendetta. The state thought differently and carried through with the charges themselves. They charged me with attempted manslaughter and assault with a deadly weapon. I took a deal and did 395 days in a medium security state penitentiary. I haven't seen him since, but I know we both have families, lives, and futures. My only hope is that he's long since forgiven me and now lives in peace. Kidnapping, assault, vandalism, and arson, I guess. My best friend's sister was dating a guy that my friend did not approve of. When he found out, things got pretty ugly, to put it lightly. His sister needed hospitalization, and, well, the rest of us snapped. The community in the area at the time was quite close-knit, and he was from a different part of town, so one night he was driving into our neck of the woods before he was knocked off the road by a diversion sign. His car got smacked into a tree, and we pulled him out before throwing him into a van after setting that car on fire. We drove him south over the border after giving him a kicking ourselves, and we warned him if he ever came back near that part of town, he wouldn't live to see it. After that, we threw him out and drove back home. Needless to say, he was never seen in the area again. Also, the reason the cops didn't do much was because this part of town was well known for constant hijackings, attacks, sectarianism, and stuff like that. Top it all off with a close-knit community of people that they knew weren't going to rat us out either. I crashed a motorcycle with a friend on the back who later died. She was rather drunk, and in mid-left-hand turn, she leaned really hard to the right, causing the bike to hit a curb and both of us to fall off. I flew about 30 feet into some bushes, and she fell straight down by the curb. It was about 2 a.m., so nobody else was on the road. She was unconscious the whole time. Ambulances came and took us away. She was induced into a coma. I went straight to jail to await her outcome. Once the family ended the life support, I was sent to a state prison camp to finish out a year of incarceration. I'd been drinking, and that didn't improve the situation. I wasn't charged with a DUI, just regular vehicular manslaughter. I owe $500,000 in restitution for medical bills, and I'm a felon for a minimum of 15 years. I feel horrible for everything, and I'd change it if I could. I'm very fortunate to only go to jail for 1 year. Being in the real world is more difficult than I thought it would be. Nobody will hire me due to the felony. I moved out of state to California where the probation is much more relaxed, and I'm able to live my life. Still no jobs, but it's a little better in general. Someone committed the unspeakable act on a friend of mine, and she wouldn't go to the police about it. The guy was drunk, and my friend doesn't drink, by the way. I caught the guy from behind one night by chance, and I beat and kicked the crap out of him, took his wallet, and left. We lived in a bad area at the time, and a guy getting mugged late at night was nothing more than a statistic. I figured a completely random beating might have drawn more attention. I later found out that he'd done the same thing to at least one other woman, and I have zero regrets beyond not thinking enough to aim for his groin more. I'm pretty sure I'd have a lot more trouble sleeping at night if I'd done nothing, to be honest. Well, yeah. Can't say that I condone many, if any, of the vigilante justice taken in these stories, and our viewers should take away that you should always pursue the legal action in situations like this. That said, I'm not sad that this happened to the guy and some of the others like him. I got caught with a crapload of Mary J. 120 hours of community service and 14 substance and alcohol classes later, and I'm free. Newt Gingrich wanted the death penalty for anyone with more than 2 ounces. He would have killed me, twice over. Victimless, non-violent crimes shouldn't be handled so harshly. Had I had a record or been a minority at the time, I'd probably be sitting in prison right now. I got a sunburn, but I'm in the US Navy, so technically that's destruction of government property. I'm not kidding. I robbed an old lady substance dealer at weapon point. The plan was just to get a pound of green herb, but it turned into this huge pain in the butt when we first showed up. This lady was a junkie and had junkies all over the house. I was getting teed off because she kept giving me and my friend the runaround. You should have seen the bathroom. It was full of holes from the junkies thinking the drywall was just more stuff for them. She had a 7-year-old son that got home from school, and she had us watching him while she went out to go get the herb. I got even more furious when the little boy told me that his mother makes him play his video games on the computer so she can take her medicine. It was frickin' solitaire on the computer. Anyway, she got back and obviously she's short, and somehow I got some pills that I didn't want because I'm guessing she thought she could steal from me. So we're in the back room and I pull out a gat and told her I'm taking everything and the money. I'm not paying for anything. I also told her she was a horrible mother and I'm calling child services. She flipped out, telling me she'll find me and I was a dead man. When I left, I called child services and I never heard anything about it again. A guy pushed me over in a bar. I'm a girl, by the way. This guy had a previous for attacking women as well. He'd punched his ex in the face and been to court for bottling a lady, but he'd never been sentenced because there wasn't enough evidence. But yeah, he pushed me over and I just snapped. I hit him in the face with the pint glass I was holding and the whole thing broke in his face. There was a lot of red. The cops were called. I was being really calm and coherent. I was cooperating with them so they didn't cuff me. I got in the car with them and I was held in a cell overnight. Couple of no-comment interviews later and I was free. I went to court and pled guilty. Got 180 hours of community service, £285 and a 6-week exclusion order from bars, pubs and clubs. Looking back, I overreacted. But that guy deserved it. I still have glass in my hand to this day, and this happened about 2 or 3 months ago. In short, glassed a guy for being a woman-beating C-word. It was about 12 AM when I found myself in the town of Orange on the Friday of my work week. Using Reddit and Encyclopedia Dramatica, I was familiar with who Chris Chan was and pretty sure that he lived nearby. A quick search on my phone pulled up his address and it turned out it was half an hour away according to the GPS. I finished work up at approximately 12:30 AM. Being that my company provided me with a work vehicle and covered all of my gas without asking questions regarding mileage, I drove my unmarked work vehicle to his home, parked down the street, and crept up to the back of his car and stole the plate off the back. This is much easier than it sounds, because Chris's house is the only house on the entire street that has a lamplight on at night. The back of the vehicle was also under shade from a tree, and I was wearing dark clothing. In any case, I didn't make enough noise removing the license plate to stir up our man-baby hero in the process of nicking the plate. It sounds like a lot of effort, but it's really not when you're used to driving 6 to 10 hours a day for work sometimes. In short, immature, but yeah, I stole Chris Chan's license plate off the back of his car. I now have a Virginia state license plate with the letters Sonny Chu sitting in my home, waiting for whatever to be done with it. I suppose in the eyes of the law, I am a dangerous criminal. Last year, I was convicted of grievous bodily harm with intent. We were out one evening and my friend got in a fight with a guy. I didn't stop it and he ended up in hospital. Because I didn't stop in to help the guy afterwards and didn't phone the police, I was charged under a UK law called joint venture, which made me as legally accountable for his actions as he was. I got a 3-month custodial suspended for 1 year, my housemate got 3 years. The only reason I wasn't sent to prison is that I'm currently at university and it would have cost me my place. Standing in court on my 23rd birthday being sentenced was the most ball-shattering, terrifying moment of my life. I ended a man. I have no regrets. I was never caught and in the same situation, I'd do it again, because I honestly believe it was him or me. He tried to mug me, I didn't let him, and he got violent. When he pulled a knife, I decided it was all or nothing, so yeah, he died. I didn't care, and I got away from the scene. I felt no guilt, and I still don't, but I was terrified about being caught. It probably went down as just another dosed-up scumbag getting his comeuppance. I honestly do not care. He attacked, he had a weapon, and I protected myself. One less dangerous person at large. More manslaughter, but whatever. I ended him, and I sleep easy at night. When I was an adolescent, I synthesized methamphetamine regularly. I obtained precursors, reagents, and glassware from my school's chemistry lab. I was the teacher assistant. I used online message boards to learn the synthesis method. I did small-scale red, white, and blue reaction. I also dealt other stuff like white snow, crystal, mushrooms, and Mary J. I traveled abroad numerous times, returning to the States, each time with loads of stuff for personal use and reselling. What can I say? I thought I was clever and was incredibly frickin' stupid. I'm immensely grateful that I never got in trouble. Now I'm mostly a law-abiding student and a moderately successful artist. I do still get those thrill-seeking urges, but I try to keep my mischief to wheat pasting and going 5 miles over the speed limit. When did your doctor completely and utterly roast you? My female doctor, now retired, once told me I had great birthing hips. I'm a male. When I was in middle school until 10th grade, I'd get violent nausea anytime I got hungry. It felt like my stomach was on fire, and I'd miss a lot of school from feeling like crap, although I was a good student and wasn't falling behind in any way. She agreed to take me to a gastroenterologist to be checked out. Before agreeing to do an endoscopy, the gastro accused me of exaggerating because I was a teen girl, and that's apparently just what young women do. He suggested I was just making up the symptoms for attention and then asked me point-blank if I was lying about my pain level to skip school and suggested I had a mental health issue I was trying to cover for. I had frickin' GERD and severe acid reflux, as confirmed by the endoscopy he reluctantly agreed to perform on me. Instead of letting it go, the gastro made a point of angrily telling me that I had the stomach of an 80-year-old man and must have been intentionally eating in a way to F up my stomach. I have a family history of stomach problems and GERD. I don't understand why it was so implausible that my brother could have acid reflux at a young age, but I must be a hysterical liar when I claim to have the same symptoms in my teens. When I was about 4, I got diagnosed with child asthma. The doctor told my mum it was her fault because she decided to have a child despite having asthma herself. "I'm sure it's not that bad," said the intake nurse at the inpatient psychiatric unit that I was checking myself into after a self-deletion attempt following an attempt of the unspeakable act on me. "I'm okay. I did a short stay at the inpatient and everyone else who worked there, and honestly, and maybe more significantly, everyone else who was also staying there, was kind, thoughtful, helpful, and seemed to be much better at their jobs. And this was about 2 years ago now. Things are better, but not perfect. I think that sometimes that is hard, especially for people who are in my life. They seem to be waiting for a version of me that is perfectly fine, and I'm not sure she exists anymore. But it is better than it was, most of the time. Sometimes it's harder, or at least similar, but I'm still here, and sometimes being still here is okay being the only success for the day. I have my work, I have my son, I have my circle of people who really stuck by me, and that's a lot to hold on to. Today we learned that there are many doctors and nurses with a breathtaking lack of empathy or personal skills. Let's be thankful that these seem to be the minority in most cases, as a lot of these individuals immediately move on to more capable, compassionate caregivers. In the ER, about 6 months pregnant with heavy spotting and no noticeable fetal movement. Idiot doctor is unable to find the baby's heartbeat. Just looks up at me and says, "Yep, probably dead in there." He couldn't possibly have said it in a more casual, offhand manner. Note that I delivered my son 3 months later, perfectly healthy. Different kind of doctor, it was a dentist. He said after poking that sharp piece of steel into my not dead yet gums, "Oh come on, it doesn't hurt that much," after I jumped and said ouch. I looked at him, got up and walked out. I now have a very nice dentist. He asked me if I felt I was lonely. I said I don't think of myself as lonely. He wrote down lonely and underlined it. I don't know why, but this strikes me as particularly funny, as if the doctor looked at you, narrowed his eyes, and then wrote it and underlined the word. I went to get a lump on my groin checked out and had to remove my underpants. The doctor started a whole speech about size isn't everything, which is not what I went there for. He said I should be happy carrying around a bit of weight, because in drought, the fattest cows die last. Seriously, what the frick? I had gained a lot of weight around my midsection a few years back, and my times of the month stopped. I was scared, young, and thought I was pregnant, but the tests came back negative. I went to a doctor to have myself checked out, and she did some basic tests before telling me, "There's nothing wrong with you, you're just fat." I already had some body confidence issues, but hearing it from my doctor when I was trying really hard to get in shape really hurt. I worked hard to lose weight, but my belly wouldn't shrink. I was just starting to feel really sick, and I went back to the doctor, who again told me it was just that I was fat. I was crushed. A year later, I went to the hospital for something unrelated, and it was discovered I had a giant ovarian cyst about the size of a newborn. It was throwing off my hormones, making me gain weight, among many other issues. I've since lost weight, and I'm feeling super confident now, but that doctor really messed me up for a long time. Something similar happened to a friend of mine. She was slim, her stomach kept growing, and she was very firm to the touch. A female doctor told her she was pregnant. My friend said unless it's the second coming of Christ, she can't be, as she hasn't done the deed for months. The doctor tells her she must have gotten blackout drunk and done the deed with someone because she's definitely pregnant, no need for a test. Male doctor 2 was seen for a second opinion and pretty much straight away realized it was a giant cyst requiring surgery. "Oh, it's all between your ears," they said after missing at least one, but probably 2 crippling vitamin deficiencies by not ordering the right test. It took me 2.5 years of thinking I was lazy and pathetic before I went to another doctor and got diagnosed. I was having digestive issues I eventually learned were a result of my undiagnosed cancer. My first doctor had just suggested I should wipe better. I went to get an earache checked, and the first thing the doctor said was, yeah, so I'm going to put you on some medicine for the ear, but we've got to do something about your face. Your acne is absolutely terrible. Thanks, doc. Getting out of the army, you're 100% healthy. My medical record was about 6 inches thick. I went to a civilian doctor, and they were astonished anyone would say that. I am rated 80% disabled. My mother and grandfather were both injured in the army. They will do everything in their power to claim you're healthy, because if you're injured, they pay your medical bills for life. They tried to tell my grandpa that losing all of his teeth and having a crack on his forehead did not qualify him for a Purple Heart. I just don't know how you could be in so much pain being so young. I'm not going to be able to write you a prescription. My response was, "You're an idiot. I came in because I was hurt at work doing heavy construction. I'd never even asked for a prescription in the first place. I'd assumed I was getting an x-ray to see if I'd broken anything." I woke up in the hospital and heard a nurse running out saying, "He's awake!" The doctor comes into the room and tells me to move my toes. I ask them where I am and what's going on. He just gets more insistent at me to move your toes. I asked again where I was and what was going on, and he almost yelled at me, "Move your toes!" I said I am moving my toes, and immediately he says, "You'll never be able to walk again." And that's how I found out I was a paraplegic at 21 years old. I'd been in a single car wreck and was thrown 70 or 80 feet from the car, and my vertebra was dislocated and laying next to another one. I don't remember the car wreck, but that exchange with my doctor is burned into my brain, and that was 31 years ago. I had a seatbelt on, but I went off a small hill next to the interstate after clipping an end off the guardrail. Flipped the car down the hill, and seatbelt gave way under the pressure, and I went out the driver door window. My back collapsed around the door sill and dislocated one vertebra next to the one below it. I'm a big guy, 6'4" and 235 pounds at the time, and the force was too much for the seat structure. I found out all of these details over the next few weeks while I was in rehab. "Oh, you can't be in that much pain. You must have more energy than that." Turns out the lining of my nerves was being destroyed. I was becoming paralyzed. Painfully. I did a video chat service to talk to a doctor for 15 minutes. I told her my symptoms and thoughts since we were low on time. I'd been very sick for weeks, possibly urinary tract infection and respiratory infection. Also gave my other ideas from my symptoms. She told me I had valley fever and told me all about it over chat, and we got cut off at 15 minutes. I got her final email, which should have a prescription on it, and was told she actually thought I had somatic symptom disorder, aka that I was making all of this up and was perfectly fine. Her prescription was for a frickin' psychologist. She'd told me in detail about my possible valley fever, even though I said I hadn't been to the areas she said it was prevalent in. I made an appointment with my normal doctor and had a few tests run. Had a respiratory infection and a frickin' kidney infection. 10 or so days of medication and I was okay. My God, I was so angry at that quack though. Was it April Fool's? Did they just grab someone off of Fiverr to cover for them that day while they were on a video consultation duty so they could head to the pub early? You know, I know every profession has the capacity to be unprofessional, but cops, soldiers, and doctors are the professions it's most jarring to hear about this kind of thing in. When I was 16 and dealing with partial deafness, look, sometimes being a teenage girl is hard, but it's hard to parent them too, so there's no need to exaggerate things to make things harder for your parents. Now knock it off, there's nothing wrong with you. 2 tumors, 9 surgeries, and a CSF leak later, yes, doctor, yes, there really was something wrong. I'd send that doctor a card with images of your tumors with a note that reads, "The inadequacy of your professional capabilities is a measurable danger to public health." I'd just gone through my second hip surgery following a car accident. The pain was persistent. My doctor said, "On the bright side, you'll qualify for a full hip replacement in 10 years. Frick my life, 10 more years of this crap and another surgery? You can submit your own stories to be featured here on the channel. The story submission link is in the description below. And if you want to listen to some vibey music in the background, check out easymode, also linked below, and subscribe. It wasn't said to me, but someone I knew. I work at a hospital, and so does my mother. We had a 43-year-old woman who had a very rare form of cancer that spread incredibly fast to just about everywhere in her body. From diagnosis to death was about 12 weeks. The medications and therapies and general lack of mobility caused her to become swollen and obese. She was a terribly sweet lady. They took her down to radiology for a scan, and the technician made a bunch of really mean comments about her weight because she was too large for our machines, so they had to arrange for a transfer to another hospital for her scans, and then have her transferred back. The technician thought that because Miss Jeannie was dying and sick, that she was deaf or didn't understand English any longer. So while they were alone, she made so many mean comments. Miss Jeannie waited until she was back in her room, waiting for her transfer, before she started crying. I'll never understand people who feel the need to make others feel less than or badly. Sadly, the tech still works for us. After years of fertility treatments, we finally got the wife knocked up. Just before the 12-week mark, they found something. The something was anencephaly. Not knowing what it was, we kept asking doctors what this meant and got very doctory answers. The prognosis isn't good, or it presents significant challenges to the fetus, all of which made it sound bad but somehow manageable. As we continued through the gambit of doctors, we eventually ended up with the one who had that declarative Scandinavian accent. When we asked him, "What does this mean for the child?" he answered, "His condition is incompatible with life. If it survives to birth, it will only live for days." It was at once soul-crushing and a relief. We finally knew how bad it was, but we knew what we had to do. The decision was no longer ours, and while it hurt, the clarity was welcome. Recalling this story many years later still makes me feel emotional. Finally worked up the courage to work on my mental health problems and asked my doctor for a recommendation to see a therapist. His only response was that I was too poor to get a therapist since my health insurance sucked. That was a bad day. I don't know if anyone will see this, but in perfect timing, my university was looking for therapy participants for a study. I now have 6 2-hour therapy sessions booked for free. I'm so happy. Thank you for all the replies and suggestions. I'm so appreciative. When I had a kidney stone, I was asked, "Why did you come to the ER? Why didn't you take Tylenol or something? This is a waste of my time." He made me cry. My ex used to tell me that I was a waste of resources all the time because I'd constantly be making doctor's appointments to figure out what was wrong. He felt pretty bad when I told him I was diagnosed with Crohn's disease a couple of years later. My doctor suggested that I have a baby because my nether regions were too tight and causing discomfort during the deed. Yeah, sure, I'll blast out a screaming ham and see if that increases my pleasure. As a doctor, I've got to tell you something that not many people are willing to admit. About 10 to 15% of all health professionals I've met during my time in school are just awful human beings who don't belong in medicine. They lie, cheat, and just don't care about people. On the flip side, you have about 15% of some of the greatest doctors you've ever met who follow up with you and care for you like you're their own family. 70% just fall somewhere in the middle. So the truth I'm getting at is that being a doctor isn't just the pursuit of those that care for others, but a representation of how our society is as a whole. This wasn't psychologically hurtful necessarily, but the most terrifying thing I've ever been told. "We're going to have to defibrillate you and we don't have time to sedate you." They rolled the crash cart with pedals into my room and I said, "Get that thing the frick away from me," and I almost cried. My mum was in the room with me and was absolutely hysterical. Thankfully, a cardiologist was able to look at my EKG in the nick of time and determined my heart rhythm was stable enough for me to just be transferred to a room for further evaluation without defibrillation. When I was 21, I went to a doctor for a checkup. The doctor asked me to lift my shirt, and I did. He immediately says, "Ugh," and makes a look of disgust on his face. I was an idiot and was gaining weight too quickly. Due to this, I had stretch marks. I've lost the weight and I'm a normal weight now, but I still can't shake that moment. This was 8 years ago. When I was just a little kid, my mum took me to the dentist and he was stabbing above and under my tongue and the inside of my cheeks with the tool that dentists use to clean your teeth and remove plaque, and he said, "If you cry, I'm going to start over." I started going to a dentist that had come highly recommended by a few different people. When I asked him about the possibility of straightening my front teeth, he said, "Well, you'll never be on the cover of Vogue, but I think we can help you out." I stopped going to him a few appointments later when he got mad at me for telling him that the filling he did months ago still really hurt. Okay, so I felt like the fear that a lot of kids have of dentists was just associated with their sharp tools and the vulnerability of the position, but now we've had a few in a row who seem like genuinely horrible, scary people. I don't know that this will help anyone with the fear of those particular medical practitioners, but at least we can say that now I understand your fear. To my wife, about 8 weeks pregnant at an oncologist office after a gynecologist saw a polyp she wanted someone to look at. The doctor said, "You need to have a hysterectomy immediately." We asked, "Shouldn't we wait until the biopsy results come back?" Doctor said, "No, in my opinion, if you want to live, you need to have a hysterectomy immediately." Turns out it was benign. Discoloration is normal for Pacific Islanders during pregnancy. The butthole got the results from biopsy the next day, and we weren't told the results until the following week. We waited. Our son is almost 16 now, and we never saw that doctor again. We knew that she received the biopsy results the next day because the mother-in-law was a doctor also, and the pathologist who did the biopsy ended up being a friend. Well, what are you going to do if your boyfriend would rather you had a larger chest? This was said by the doctor to 15-year-old me. I was getting a consultation for a chest reduction because sporting G-cup was a fricking nightmare. Still got the reduction, no regrets. The doctor said, "I can tell you're incredibly sick by your skin." I looked in the mirror. "Oh no, I always look like this. No, really, it's grey and sallow and the heavy dark circles under your eyes. You look clearly very unwell." "Really, I swear I always look like this without makeup." I really did look exactly how I do on a daily basis. Apparently, deathly. I should add that I was in A&E at the time due to a kidney infection. I'm now totally fine, but I still look exactly as I did that morning at 4 a.m. Not to me, but to my mum. The doctor said, "Oh, just let him hide in the bathroom." I hid in the bathroom when I got really bad headaches that turned out to be due to a brain tumor. The doc must have assumed I was tickling my pickle or something. Hiding in a bathroom is common for people who get migraines, FYI. The doctor, glancing at my nether regions, "You have herpes." "But I've never done the deed." "Oh, stop crying, I diagnose this all the time, it's pretty common. But aren't you at least going to do a test?" "Fine, but it's going to hurt and it's going to show exactly what I've said." It was, indeed, an allergic reaction to a medication. Me, with my pants down, getting checked for a hernia. "Are you able to get hard?" That is me hard." And for those of you asking why you need to get your rigidity checked for a hernia exam, you don't. The doctor was asking if I was able to get one, since a hernia can affect your genitals, and the doctor was just checking. I went to the doctor's office as a child because I was terribly ill and throwing up. The doctor asked if school exams were coming up. I said, "Yes." And she simply said, that explains it," and then she rolled her eyes. I had to take my son to the ER when he was 2 because he was having trouble breathing. The ER doc said he most likely had asthma, so she gave us an inhaler. Flash forward to 3 days when we go to have his follow-up with his pediatrician. Dr. Donkey goes, "So, he saw this ER doctor once in his life and you trusted her to make a lifelong determination that your son has asthma. That's pretty ridiculous." 6 months later, after 3 more ER visits with my son being unable to breathe, and Dr. Donkey says, "Looks like I owe you an apology. Turns out your son quite likely does have asthma." I mean, I'm surprised he apologized at least. New doctor took my height measurements and jots them down before issuing me a very casual, tall for a woman. I am a bearded man. I came in for something totally different and she commented on my stretch marks on my hips and around my chest. I was around 17 years old and I'd gotten them when I hit puberty because I'd developed so much in a short amount of time. I explained this to her and she had a whole dialogue with herself about her originally thinking it would have been because I used to be fat, and after my explanation just lamenting about how sad it was for me that I'd had to live my entire life with a body like that. I changed doctor the next day. At about 3 months pregnant, I started spotting. Spent about 10 hours at the hospital, lots of ultrasounds down there, lots of diagnostic testing. Nothing they can do. They tell me to go home and wait to miscarry. I was a wreck. It was now late, dark and rainy outside, but I don't have a way to get home because my hubby is at work with our only car. We were very young and poor. The doctor says the nurses have taxi vouchers they can give me to get home. I go to the nurses' station, ask for a taxi voucher, and the nurse says, "We only give taxi vouchers to women who have living babies. If you take anything away from this, please let it be the fact that young people sometimes need a little help navigating life." This nurse's one comment caused me years of being afraid to ask for things, for fear of not only being turned down, but also humiliated. In short, try not to be such a jerk. It was suggested to me that I'd confused a panic attack for a seizure, and to clarify, this was my first grand mal seizure. My father had them prior, and my mother witnessed both him having one and myself having mine. According to her, it was identical. I even hit all of the textbook marks of having had an epileptic seizure, from the memory loss to the post-tictal fatigue. The emergency room doctor didn't run any tests or examine my family history of epilepsy. He simply noticed the anxiety disorder in my medical history and assumed that I was just having a panic attack, and wrote it off as my only issue being that I'd hit my head. Talking to my psychiatrist later about the incident, he confirmed based only on my account, corroborated with my mum's details where I couldn't fill in, that I'd definitely had a seizure, and he sent the orders for further testing himself. He also couldn't refrain from saying, "What the F is wrong with this doctor?" I'm glad that at least one of my doctors took me seriously. When did you realize that someone was basically too dumb to breathe? This guy burned down his convenience store for an insurance claim, but he stopped the milk and bread deliveries the day before. I demolished my right foot and a bunch of other stuff in a motorcycle crash, and I had to have the top of my foot removed. Guy I worked with asked me when it would grow back. I explained that the skin and stuff was going to have to be grafted, but the tendons and bones that had been removed were gone forever. He looked me dead in the eye and asked, "Well, why don't they just cut the whole frickin' thing off and let it grow back?" Going through security, and the person says I need to show a different form of ID. I ask why because I gave them my driver's license. They say I need a US document like a green card or something. I'm a US citizen. And then I realized. I explained how District of Columbia is long for DC, as in Washington, DC, as in the capital of our country. Oh my god, I can relate. I'm from New Mexico. The number of people who think that we're a foreign country is astounding. Coworker bought a low-flow showerhead. He filled the bathtub using the new low-flow showerhead because he thought it would use less water. While driving from one big city to another, I stopped in a small town to eat at a fast food chain in Texas. I order my food, get my orange number 10, and sit down to wait for my order. The lady who's bringing out orders has this "I give up" demeanor as she's calling out numbers that guests just aren't claiming. Each time this happens, she speaks to a couple of tables to seemingly figure out who the food is for. Then I hear her call number 55 while holding a tray of food for one person. I was number 54 and noticed I was the only single-party guest at the place. We make eye contact and she heads towards me. She confirms my order with me and says, "Sorry, for some reason the computer prints one number higher." And I immediately ask, "Well then why don't you just call out one number lower than what's printed?" She freezes and I can see the gears turning in her head. I tell her, "Well, thanks," and she goes on her merry way. Well, some people are bad enough at math that they'd rather not do the work of -1, I suppose. No judgment, I can barely count under pressure. I'm an identical twin, and I've been asked all manner of utterly ridiculous questions about it throughout my life. But I think the stupidest was when a girl once asked me, "Do you ever get yourselves mixed up with each other?" And I responded, "Are you asking me if I ever think that I'm my brother?" And she replied, "Yeah. No, I don't." When I was in middle school, I was in art class with a boy named Devon. I told him my sister has the same name as him, and he asked me what her name was. The time I watched someone who'd missed their exit on the highway stop on the shoulder, back up, turn around, and go up to the entrance ramp, I could not frickin' believe it. A couple of fun details about this incident to really highlight its stupidity. The next exit was a few miles up the road. Going to that exit and then turning around might have delayed their drive by 15 minutes tops. There was no traffic ahead, and I watched this person do this as I was coming down that same entrance ramp to get onto the highway. I work for Parks Canada in Yoho National Park. I've been asked the question, seriously, where do you keep the animals at night? Twice in my career. To this day, I still find great joy imagining what they thought was going on each night as we collected every large animal in the parks. I was a co-hostess with a girl in a restaurant, watching ads on a hanging TV for a new movie. At the end, it said, "Coming soon to a theater near you." To which she turned to me with wide eyes and genuinely asked, "How do they know where I live?" There are so many more stories about this chick, but this one sums it up the best. She also had to stop walking to drink anything or she'd fall over, and she didn't understand that not all women have to wax their mustaches because not all women have them. She was 20. We were talking about a similar story this weekend. My aunt used to go to the movies when she was younger and write down the names of the previews. I guess she missed the movie name and wrote it down as "Coming Soon." It's been like 20 years and my uncles, her brothers, still ask her if she's seen the movie Coming Soon. It's probably streaming on Pornhub. This was my first experience in retail where I learned what many customers would be like. The seasons were changing, so we put a lot of shirts we had to get rid of in the front and made them 50% off. I was working the register when a woman came up to buy her things. I rang her up and I could see the look on her face like something was wrong. And then the following happened. "Why is this so much?" "Pardon me? This should only be $10, not $20. I thought that maybe her item was on sale, so I asked if she could point out the sign because I wasn't aware of it. It was a small store and we didn't have to walk anywhere, so she just pointed, "This sign here." "Okay, this sign says that all shirts are 50% off." "Yes, so why is this full price?" "This is a hat." We asked our classmate to prove she knew the 7 continents. Her list went like this: North America, Europe, China, the Pacific Ocean. I'm not even bullcrapping you. Damn, to think that she missed Mount Everest, the Pacific Ocean, and the Polar Express. It's like they aren't even teaching geography in schools anymore. Sad, really. Watching a man try to open the locked front door of my shop while a bright red closed sign was literally inches from his face. He kept looking at the door like it was just stuck. Summer camp counselor made all of the kids on a school bus keep the windows up on a hot day because they could feel the air conditioning coming from the front of the bus. It was so hot, and I, maybe 10 years old at the time, had to explain to the 40-year-old counselor that the air conditioning they were feeling was the wind coming in through the bus driver's open window. She still didn't believe me. I begged her to ask the bus driver to confirm the bus did not have air conditioning, but she didn't want to bother him while he was driving. It was like a 1-hour bus trip. She finally got hot enough and asked the bus driver if the bus had air conditioning, and he jokingly said, "The bus only has air conditioning when the windows are down and the wheels are turning." She looked back at me and said, "See? I told you the bus had air conditioning," and proceeded to force us to keep the windows up. There was a girl in my high school who forced the teacher to pause a documentary about people living in mud huts in Africa because she was upset that they were showing us fictional movies in a history class. It took everybody else in the room to convince her that people actually live like that in some places. That's wealthy area living for you. I was friends with the guy who believed those fake Apple adverts like, "Apple Wave, microwave your phone for instant battery charge." I was so dumbfounded that he actually fell for it. When I saw him the week after, he had a new phone and it all clicked for me. When I was younger, I was mad that everyone else had an accent and I didn't. 3 years later, I realized that I did in fact have an accent and that I was on another level of stupid. Back when the Fukushima nuclear power plant disaster happened, we were discussing how the reactor had failed in science class. 5 minutes into the conversation, a girl piped up and said, "I don't see what the big deal is. Why can't we just regrow it?" She thought that a nuclear power plant was a plant. Oh, bless. Well, she's trying, giving solutions rather than just problems. But yes, yet another demonstration of why when someone says, "Why don't you just?" 8 times out of 10, you're about to hear one of the stupidest things you've ever heard. Knew a girl in middle school that didn't understand the concept of perspective. She also thought that north was whichever direction you were facing at the time. How much is $50 worth? This girl was the newest teller that my boss had hired. I will never forget that moment. I had someone ask me, "Is Europe on Earth?" Well, actually, Europa is a moon on Jupiter. A friend didn't have coins for a vending machine, but did have $1. She folded up the dollar and forced it into the coin slot and then just didn't understand why she didn't get her item. For me, I had a concussion and I was getting x-rays taken. They gave me a lead blanket to wrap around my twig and berries. I took it and wrapped it around me like a cape. I couldn't understand what they wanted me to do. Someone in my history class argued that Mussolini was a type of pasta. I was helping a colleague with his graduate thesis film. My job was to animate a solar eclipse, since we couldn't shoot one for real. I animated it using some real-life reference footage to make it look realistic. When I showed him, he asked why the moon was black and had no detail. I asked him if he'd ever seen a solar eclipse, and he replied, "Yes, of course, but I want this one to look surreal since it's the moon in front of the sun. It's not like a normal solar eclipse." At this point, it became clear something was amiss, and after asking a few more clarifying questions, it became clear that he had no idea that the large object passing in front of the sun during a solar eclipse was in fact the moon. I confronted him about it and he apologized for not being great with astrology. A friend of mine worked in a call center for a credit card company in the disputes department. The number one item that people called to say they never purchased was interest charge. Ugh. I used to work with a girl who was so sweet, but so dumb. We were in a meeting once and somehow someone mentioned baked ham. My manager said, "Ugh, I hate ham. It looks like human flesh." The girl I mentioned was sitting next to me and looked horrified and whispered, "Does ham really come from people?" A group of late teens sitting outside my building, assuring each other that all the criminal charges would be dropped when they reached 21. DUIs, substance charges, traffic violations, everything. I walked away shaking my head because they were in for a reality check. When I was a kid, I had an old transistor radio. I asked my parents for a newer radio so that I could receive and listen to newer music. Whoops. You can submit your own stories to be featured here on the channel. The story submission link is in the description below. And if you want to listen to some vibey music in the background, check out easymode, also linked below, and subscribe. At the time I was working at a grocery store that had a Coinstar machine. Basically, you could place all of your unwrapped change in it and it would be converted for a small fee that you could use for actual cash. I was walking past and I noticed a woman struggling with the machine. I stopped to help her. Turns out she'd accidentally hit Spanish as a language selection. I quickly explained what she needed to do, figuring she couldn't read Spanish as we were in the US, and this is where her struggles came from. So I run through how it works and I show her where the receipt will print out that she can turn in at a customer service for the cash. She turns and looks at me and says, "But I don't want Spanish money." I then have to explain to her that she'd get paid in US dollars. Rescued a co-worker on the side of the road with a flat tire. Waiting for the tow truck, I pointed out the nail at the top of their tire. They scoffed and looked at me like I was the stupidest person in the world and exclaimed, "That's not the cause. Look, the tire's flat at the bottom." I just walked away and never brought it up again. We were talking about the Irish potato famine in college, and this one girl said, "Oh wow, I thought it was the potato family." As if that wasn't enough, she later asked, "Why were they so eager to get jobs? If I was that hungry, I wouldn't even try to get a job." Man, I wish I was joking. I was once asked how it felt to come to the US as a refugee. I'm from Germany. She then looked rather surprised when I told her that the leader of the Third Reich had been dead for 75 years and that Germany is one of the more liberal countries in the world these days. She full-on thought that I'd fled a Germany that hadn't changed since pre-World War II. I got a concussion a while back. A friend of mine told me not to come close because it might be contagious. And sadly, they weren't kidding. A girl in my school had gotten about 3 concussions within a year, and when she hit her head the 4th time and blacked out for a minute, she refused to go to the doctor because, "The last time they said if I got another concussion it would cause brain damage, so I'm not going to let them give me another one." I had to explain to a woman that apples didn't contain any gluten, meat, or dairy ingredients. How can one think apples contain dairy? Or meat? She thought gluten was found in every major grain and that apples were a grain because they have seeds. I had to explain to a girl why you couldn't grow your hair down in front of your face and just cut out eye holes. Even explaining it to her, she couldn't grasp it and brushed me off as being too smart. I had a coworker who could never figure out what time her 15-minute break was over. We were both bank tellers. Ex-flatmate cancelled the gas and electricity contract because it was too expensive. I wondered why we had no more electricity nor gas. She thought we paid €90 a month to get a hotline 24/7 in case of a problem. I was friends with a couple who only had enough money to pay either the cable bill or the electricity, so they paid the cable. A couple of days later, the power was turned off. And so they sat in the dark, cold but secure in the knowledge that if they had a working TV, it would be showing the cable. I joke, they probably thought that the TV provider would magically keep it powered via the network. My friend is allergic to walnuts. One day he made his sandwich in our college dorm. It had walnuts garnished on top of the bread. I then remember him telling me, "Oh look, there's walnuts on here," and proceeds to eat the entire sandwich. At the time, I didn't know he was allergic or I would have stopped him. I leave to shower, and when I come back, there are 2 paramedics in our dorm taking him out on a stretcher. The following day, I asked what happened, to which he replies something along the lines of, "I accidentally ate some walnuts which I'm allergic to, and by the time I went to get a Benadryl, my throat had started to close, and I couldn't swallow it, so I had to call 911. I was just utterly shocked how he even let this entire situation happen. I really couldn't believe it. He had known there were walnuts on the bread. He pointed out the walnuts on the bread to me and still ate it. College days, am I right? Once at my old job, a coworker came out the back and I offered him some chocolate somebody had dropped off for us. He thanked me and popped it in his mouth and then chewed it for a bit and cheerfully asked me, "Oh, do you know if there's nuts in this, by the way? I'm allergic to them, so I really shouldn't be eating chocolate." And I was like, "What? I've literally never seen a bar of chocolate that didn't contain the 'may have traces of nuts' warning. Why are you eating this?" And he goes, "Ah yeah, good point," and spat it into the bin and then happily wandered back out front like nothing had happened. In high school, I met a boy who asked me for a hygienic cloth because he thought he had a period. Actually, he only sat on a melted popsicle. An old coworker was telling me that there's people out there that think Alaska is an island. I laughed in disbelief, but another coworker overheard and was flabbergasted. "What? It's not? But it's always drawn off to the side of Hawaii." Point made. Another time, a guy with a really thick accent walked in. Some girl was like, "Oh wow, I like your accent. Where are you from?" He answered, "Have a guess," and her response, "Have a guess? I've never heard of that place before." And she walked away. She's a really nice person, just slightly oblivious. I teach high school English. I was working with a small 9th grade group and I found out that all 4 of them thought that Alaska was an island. And they weren't kidding. I grabbed a globe to show them and one of them asks, "But how recent is that map?" I laughed really hard, but I discovered once again that it was not a joke. I worked at a meat desk for a summer job and a woman came in and asked if we had any meat without spices or sauces. She then proceeded to tell us that the doctor had said that her dogs got sick because she kept feeding them pizza and they couldn't handle the spices. She then said, "Oh, but they love pizza so much. I feel bad for them. I'm probably still going to feed them pizza." My wife's cousin and her husband and not baby daddy of her unborn child fell on a self-induced hard time and needed a place to stay for a bit. We set up a queen-sized air mattress in the living room for them, and for 3 weeks I woke up to go to work, and every morning I saw them sleeping on it sideways with their legs hanging off the edge. Then one day she asked me to buy her a bigger air mattress because this one was hard on their backs. I told her to turn her body, and her response was that then they wouldn't be able to see the TV. Then frickin' turn the air mattress to face the TV. And that's the story of how I became the butthole to the trailer trash side of the family. The bad part is that it's only one of many stories. The husband was a cook at Applebee's, the baby daddy was a cook at Applebee's, and her new husband was, well, another cook at the same frickin' Applebee's. They all worked together. I work retail. Had a customer during the pandemic pull her mask down to cough into the open air and then pull it back up. Really makes you wonder why there are people like this in the world. I once forgot to bring my laptop to school, so my mum had to bring it in. My maths teacher was notified and sent me a message telling me to pick up my laptop at the front office, but the only way I could see the message was if I had my laptop with me. My boss asked me to file the spam mail. This man was one of those people who think that they're the smartest person in the room. So, spam folder. Okay. Weird, but okay. I couldn't find any spam mail that wasn't already in the spam folder. The afternoon comes around and he stomps over to my desk and wants to know why the spam isn't in the spam folder as he throws a manila folder on my desk. The folder was labeled spam. He prints spam mail out and files it. And with any sign of skepticism on my face, he'd insist the IT guy told him that's where the spam goes. So he got himself a folder, and that was it. I had to get the frick out of that job. I worked at a pet store in college. This customer asked me which food would make his pit bull swole. I suggested a high-protein food with a good amount of exercise, but advised that a lot of it was determined by the dog's genetics. He asked me if we sold genetics. This time a friend told me how much he hates potatoes while eating French fries, and I literally blew his mind by telling him that French fries are potatoes. My friend was taking a selfie. The camera was smudged, so we told him he should clean it. He then turned his phone over and began cleaning the camera on the back, then turned it back over and tried to take a selfie again with the other camera. I once had two people come up to me arguing about whether spiders exist. Well, in fairness, only one of those was breathtakingly stupid, or at least ignorant, or they were both trying to play the same prank on each other. In any case, I think anyone who partakes or listens to that conversation long enough would just start dropping IQ points. I once worked in a Midwestern grocery store deli, and I was trying to explain to a woman that the name brand and generic brand of the macaroni salad that we carried were in fact identical. The woman yelled at me saying she could only have the generic brand because one's made with mayo and the other's made with mayonnaise, and I don't like mayo. When I tried to explain that mayo is an abbreviation of mayonnaise, she just said, "I'm from the South, I know my food sugar," and tutted away. I met a guy who got hit by a train. Not that bad, but a year later he wanted to show his daughter where and how he got hit by a train, and he got hit again. I locked my purse with my keys and a cell phone in my apartment. I went to the office to ask maintenance to let me in. The woman at the desk said that she'd call maintenance and asked for a phone number that they could reach me at. I said there wasn't one because my cell phone was locked in my apartment. She insisted that she needed a number. I said I could give her the number, but that I wouldn't be able to answer if they called. She suggested I get my phone out of my apartment so that I could answer when they called. I rolled my eyes at her and said if I could get in my apartment to get my cell phone, I wouldn't need maintenance to let me in. She never did understand me, but maintenance did show up 10 minutes later. Okay, and since a lot of people are asking, you don't need a key to lock the door to the apartment, just to unlock it. On the way out the door, I turned the lock on the back of the doorknob and then pulled the door shut, locking the door. I'd put my keys in my purse because I was also carrying a laptop bag and a few other things. I thought I picked up my purse with my other bags, but I hadn't. Yes, I know, I was stupid for locking myself out. What did your workplace do that made you realize you had to run? I had a wall of crazy where the CEO wanted to spend $20,000 on cool and edgy stuff for the office, and staff could make suggestions. He wanted things like slides, beanbags, napping pods, stuff like that. The project was scrapped when the top suggestions ended up being desks, chairs, working heating, working Wi-Fi, and health insurance. Hearing our CEO say, compensation is only one part of the employment experience, during an earnings call when he was answering complaints about underpaying his employees after we had reported record profits. I learned at an internship that we work hard and play hard means that we want you to work 75-hour weeks, but sometimes we'll put donuts in the break room. If there are any leftovers from the client meetings, that is. Not my company, but a company from a neighboring building. They had an entire area devoted to foosball, pinball, billiards, console gaming, and video key booths on the ground floor, and it was clearly visible because of the glass windows on street level. Oddly enough, nobody ever used that floor, and the place was almost always empty save for a few people who used the internet kiosks. When I learned a friend worked there, I asked why nobody would want to take the opportunity to use the awesome-looking recreational facility, and he told me that people who do use the facility often found it used against them during performance evaluations, even when their use wasn't excessive at all. After a while, word got around and they started avoiding the place altogether. The irony is that their recruitment ads always touted a culture of work hard, play hard. The place I'm just about to leave, handed in my notice last week, bought a pool table for the breakout space earlier in the year. It's horrible and cheap and not fun to play on anyway. But I've seen colleagues get ushered back to their desks partway through a game at 12:59 because they were in danger of overstaying their lunch break. They always make sure to show potential new hires that they have it, though. They also bought an Xbox with no games, and then complained about wasting money because nobody was using it. Why is nobody having fun? I specifically requested it. Although this is worse than Holt, because they'll actively hound and punish you for doing the thing they're telling you to do as well. Ugh. Oh, we have a great culture, lots of team lunches and drinks. When I started, our boss had banned the social club, birthday celebrations, or recognition of birthdays, strictly no cake, taken away the Christmas party, the Christmas break period, and tried to stop people talking to each other. All the while, she'd take every second day off and have long weekends every weekend. We had maybe 3 team lunches in the time that I was there, and she always made sure to tell us that we wouldn't be paid for anything over our lunch break, even though she came too. We had to submit manual timesheet corrections to remove the amount we took. It's like, okay, fair enough, but can't you just let it slide? It's not your money, and we're talking about maybe 20 minutes here. A client also invited me to their Christmas party due to our close relationship and my good work on their files, and my boss called them and told them I wasn't allowed to go. She told me it was because she was concerned I might reflect badly on the department. Ironic, really. Lush, when we couldn't say bathroom on the shop floor and instead had to ask the manager for serenity. I think I'd just go around yelling, "Serenity, now!" I worked at the B&Q and one of my colleagues was stabbed 30 times by a customer. I was completely shaken. The next morning we were taken into a big room and made to sign a document saying we wouldn't sue them. If we didn't sign, we'd lose our jobs. Also, that colleague was stabbed only a month after they got rid of our security guard to save money. This happened a couple of weeks ago, when HR sent out an email to management, excluding me and about 2 other people, telling them to fraudulently leave good reviews on Glassdoor and to coerce others to do the same. I'll refrain from mentioning the company at this time, however it looks like this is a common issue and there needs to be a better way to call this out. Our CEO sent out an internal email whining about people posting bad reviews on Glassdoor. He said that we should keep our feedback in-house. Yeah, guy, you're cutting every department past the bone to cut costs to raise share prices so you can sell the company and make 8 figures when your options vest. Clearly, you're going to care about my criticism of your strategy. I was at a fast casual restaurant for a couple of months and the GM always talked about the culture. You know what's a great culture? When the morning shift and night shift have their daily screaming matches over crap that they each accused the other one of needing to do. It was impressive just how incompetent the entire company was from ownership down. Not me, but my husband worked for 2 weeks for a family-owned and operated business that touted how important family was and that they were all one happy family. My husband was on his way to drop our, at the time, 2-year-old son off at daycare before work when our son threw up all over himself. Husband called his employer to tell them what happened and that he needed to take his son home and clean him up, but he'd be in ASAP. His manager told him he needed to get his priorities straight. I can say I'm proud of my husband for responding with, "Yeah, you know what? You're right. I won't be back in at all." He was still working part-time at his previous job, where they'd been sad that he was leaving, so he called them and told them to put him back on the schedule full-time. That family business is currently in the process of liquidating assets before going out of business, and I cackle every time I drive past it. Last year I was working as a subcontractor and I was assigned a new place of work. Just 2 weeks after I started, the new boss wanted to hire me. He put down the contract where, compared to my current contract, pay was down 25%, average weekly hours went up by 20%, vacation days went down by 10%, and I wouldn't have a company car for personal use anymore. Before he actually handed me the contract to read, he said, "I'll only make you this offer once, but it's only valid if you change all of your pictures on your social media and you sell your car. It's too flashy for our company." How about no? This is for a flight centre headquartered in Brisbane, Australia, but they're a global company trading under many names. I think it's Liberty Travel in the States. Anyway, everything about the company internally screams cringe. Everyone treats the CEO like a frickin' god. His name is Screw, and when he takes a selfie, it's called a scroofy. Ugh. And they opened a foreign exchange ATM at the head office that they called the Screwtm, which sounds like scrotum if you ask me. It's frickin' ridiculous. When my art director wanted to get a pro bono poster on verbal abuse done faster by screaming at the designer. When I went to firm drinks in a public bar and the firm's fun committee handed out song sheets and a choir of employees led by a bad guitarist sang a song about how great the firm was to the tune of "'Cause I'm Happy." We were expected to sing along. It was at that moment I realized I was in a cult. When I went to my first corporate managers rally when I worked at Domino's, I thought this would be a cool, free catered lunch and it counted as a work day. Then they started the rally with the company cheer. I'm like, what the frick, we're adults. Why are we cheering? I looked around and way too many people were into this cheer. I realized that job wasn't going to be the one for me. When I had to phone around to the corporation leaders to find out why none of the mechanics I'd interviewed were hired, the mechanics had all come from all over the country and some had waited patiently for months to know if they got the job or not. Turned out the CEO had changed his mind and wanted me to take care of all mechanic work. I was the factory manager. But they knew I'd be upset, so neither he, HR, or the COO wanted to be the one to tell me. I worked at this business that was really keen on telling everyone that they were like a family and chastising me for not going to company parties and stuff, but that also refused to pay overtime and expected me to work late 2 or 3 times a week, as well as doing a 14-hour day twice a month for stocktake and end of month. Apparently, because we're a family, we're all expected to chip in on the big days, except it was literally just us bottom-tier workers who had to stay late. I quit that place and never looked back. Yes, it would appear that we're like a family is one of the biggest red flags one can look out for in the working world. Although I suppose we're a job, you come here, conduct a service, and are compensated for said service doesn't quite have the same whimsical note. I worked for a company that prides itself on being in the top 100 places to work in the US. They brought the hospital I was working for while I was doing IT work there. For a year, they let me stay at the current hospital I was working at with a team for countless hours getting ready to switch out IT infrastructure over to match the place's new software. We changed out all 900 computers at our location, and after that was done, I was then told that in the next few months I'd have to commute to the main campus to keep my job, a drive that for me was over 5 hours round trip. They didn't offer me to transfer or even pay compensation for driving there. I was literally forced to quit at that point, all because a new manager took over on the new fiscal year and decided that the IT department I was in needed to all be at the main campus. When our university's VP explained that the goal of every tenured faculty member was to write enough grants to pay our salaries and replace us with TAs. Every semester, ideally every undergrad class. Also would be under a hiring freeze but could feel free to be creative and use temporary grant money to hire tenured faculty. Also would all be paying an extra $250 a year in parking fees to fund a new student parking lot. Dear Lord, I was glad I'd already decided to leave. Bought out by an equity group. The new president on call with thousands of employees says, "We have 2 kinds of employees, those that work a tremendous number of hours and those that should find another company to work for." My last job was an independent school in the UK. You know, the wealthy sort. During a period of streamlining, the entire faculty were called into a hall and told in upbeat terms that we were struggling to make ends meet. Salaries were too high, perks were too abundant, and spending was unsustainable. For clarity, salaries weren't too high and perks were practically non-existent. Spending was definitely unsustainable, however, in part because they were spending hundreds of thousands redesigning the senior staff offices to hide all the cabling and install proper wood paneling. So then they started listing off perks and assigning them a value. For example, free parking. Well, no crap, the school has a lot of land and isn't in a city. Why would you charge? Secondly, nice surroundings. Well again, no crap, that's part of your marketing appeal. Long holidays? Nice try, but I work all holiday. They didn't even get as far as telling me what they planned to do with my job and pay. I was gone in less than 3 months. You can submit your own stories to be featured here on the channel. The story submission link is in the description below. And if you want to listen to some vibey music in the background, check out easymode, also linked below, and subscribe. My district manager told me to talk my key holder out of going back to college. Mind you, she wanted to be a doctor. They were proud that nobody had degrees. That's fine, but I'm not working more than 45 hours a week and mandatory holidays just to sell some shoes. The loyalty my coworkers had was so cringy. They didn't understand how we were being taken advantage of because we didn't get our degrees. Anyway, F you, going back to school was the best decision I've made. We, the management team, spent months working with a business coach trying to collectively come up with meaningful core values. We devoted a ton of time to it and really tried to decide which directions we wanted to take the company culture. Everybody agreed on teamwork, reliability, a couple of others that I can't remember now, And then one day the owner came in and called a meeting. He sat us down in the boardroom and told us he spent all weekend brainstorming and had decided on the core values. They were meaningful, ownership, neighborhood, engagement, you. Does anybody see what that spells? He literally just wanted it to be money and came up with words that sort of worked the way you do in elementary school writing your name poem. He rebranded the entire company from t-shirts with giant first letters and small letters for the rest of the word, straight down the arms, to plaques, wraps on the cars, fricking everything. And that's when we all knew it was going to get bad. Money's great, but it was mortifying walking and driving around with that plastered everywhere. I knew what I was in for when I started actually working on the floor and management was nowhere to be found. I work in the complaints department and we don't have a lot of managers. I had a belligerent customer demand a manager for his issue. I was told management were all busy, but to tell him one would give him a call back at 4. All day I asked who was calling him back at 4 and told it would be sorted. At 3:55 I was told I have to call him back. He wasn't best pleased. I worked at a popular travel stop/oversized gas station. It's practically a state icon. They're famous for their good wages for a low-income job. There's a huge sign over every entry with the starting wages around $13 per hour in a state where minimum wage is $7.25. Customers think it's a great place to work. They literally fired a girl for having a stroke. We treat our employees like family. Ignores harassment claims, hires from outside the company, refuses to give out decent pay, will write you up for doing overtime, but the CEO just bought himself a new BMW. I hate that place. When I took a 40% pay cut with no change in workload by being moved to salary. I worked at an animal hospital that wanted to be, and probably is to some, the best hospital in the city. Had the most modern equipment, looked incredibly nice inside, good Yelp ratings, and on top of that, we were told during hiring that we were a huge family and everyone loved each other. This could not be more wrong. This place was the epitome of superficial. The turnaround rate was out of control and people absolutely hated each other. The pay was horrible, even though we charged double the amount of any other hospital for our extensive care. I gave management some credit for their effort, but it was more about hiding issues instead of addressing them. We couldn't talk about our concerns because it was considered gossip, and people were fired frequently for this. And apparently they've now put audio recorders throughout the hospital to listen in on employees' conversations. I honestly don't know how anyone still works there. We had a problem with the client, and the boss dumped all of the blame on a 24-year-old woman who was basically his most loyal employee. He made her cry in front of the client, as if that would somehow help save the relationship. Treat every dollar like it was your own. Yeah, right after we went well over targets for the entire year, and then was told a Christmas party wasn't financially viable because of expenses. It's one of the biggest hospitality groups in Australia, by the way. See, America, you may have the market cornered in blatant employee mistreatment in the first world, but the rest of us are catching up to you and we'll get there. I'm in management and we just got the message that bonuses for the last financial year were severely cut across the business, probably going to receive 30% of our total potential at best. Then attended our financial end-of-year results meeting the next day to be told that net profits were 18% up, nearly $1 billion total, and the best performance in years, all thanks to us. Okay, planning on leaving now. This is what the woman who interviewed me said. Here at Cheapskate Architects, we don't often do all-nighters for our customers, but when we do, it's a real pizza party. Also, we don't pay overtime, we do it for the love. And your wage is $22K even though you're an architect. And also, I won't be there because I'm HR management, because I'm married to the director. Yes, we need an HR department even though there's 3 employees. A co-worker was forced to work while her mother was dying in hospice. Mum dies, she quits, and they escort her off the premises like a criminal. When my boss planned an office day trip to the car show and brewery, and then only invited the guys in the office. Even worse, when one of the women said we should all go, he said, No, but why don't you girls have a spa day instead? He also put on a hella racist accent whenever he talked about his many Asian clients. Obviously, there were all other issues, but those 2 stand out. Go F yourself, Tony. They changed the title of the receptionist to Director of First Impressions. For everyone asking, it's a tiny company in the Midwest. At Big W here in Australia, think Walmart but no weapons, they changed the door greeter title to Customer Champion. Stupidest frickin' thing I've ever heard, and all the managers thought it was genius. when I was asked to do the deed with a potential client. At the time, I was in my early 20s. I'm female. Looking back, I realized that I had more going on looks-wise than I knew back then. This was decades ago. My boss, the business owner, always told us that he thought of the office as being one big, you've guessed it, family. He also referred to the female employees as his girls. A new client was coming into the office. My boss called me into his office and told me he was going to give me the company credit card so I could take the potential new client out for dinner and drinks. He told me to sleep with him. We need this client if everyone wants to get paid. Nice added pressure. I said no, and the next day I quit. A couple of months earlier, my boss had invited me over to his house for dinner with his family and a swim in his pool because he said he knew how hard I'd been working. I was a little surprised that he had finally noticed and thought it was kind that he wanted to do something nice for me. I got there, and his wife and kids are gone, but there's a 25-year-old guy in his pool, the son of a client who just got out of the army. He told me he was trying to fix me up on a date because I needed to get out more. Like an idiot, I believed him. It wasn't until later I realized he was hoping I'd show more interest in the guy. I found out later that he'd asked all of the female employees at one point to sleep with clients. The secretary actually did. She was a young, single mum and was worried she'd be fired if she said no. After I quit, she told me she wished she had the option to quit. I didn't realize what she was saying until we talked later. At the time, this guy's daughter was around 4 years old. When I quit, I asked him how old would his daughter have to be before he asked her to sleep with clients. I thought he was going to hit me. I have 1,000 stories about working at that place. The guy was an unethical idiot. A dangerous combination. But I learned a lot about how to not run a business from him. I've owned my own business for 30 years now. I've never asked an employee to sleep with clients, or even go out for drinks. I had the benefit of growing up in a family with money. I wasn't earning much and would probably not have been able to quit and move on without the assistance from my parents. I never told them what happened. When I told my dad I quit, he was happy. Oh, you hated that place. Now that I'm older and times have changed, I would know what to do. I'd hope he'd have faced consequences. Today, this isn't considered a regular part of business. The Me Too movement wasn't really a thing back then. Nobody really cared. This was the only time I was directly asked to sleep with a client, but not the only time I faced unwanted attention at work. It was so common for me and my friends that when we pushed back against it, we felt like we were really on the leading edge of changing work environments for women. I guess we were, but sad that we needed to be. I certainly hoped women didn't face this anymore, but the recent news set me straight on that. I worked at Outback. The amount of team meetings and mandatory enthusiasm was ridiculous. I was given the chance to backpack across Europe with some friends for 3 weeks one summer. I told my manager and she goes, 3 weeks? I don't know, you'll have to work really hard up until then and I'll let you know if you can take that time off. I straight up told her, it's not if you let me go, it's if you still let me work here when I get back. Yeah, when I got back, I immediately started looking for new jobs. When attending a management retreat and was pressured into buying charity raffle tickets that I couldn't afford, $20. The 2 people who won before me donated their winnings to the same charity they bought the raffle tickets from. They were middle management who made more than $100K each and they were trying to look really good. I made $32K with a young daughter. I won a drawing of $400. I literally had nausea for 2 days trying to figure out how I was going to pay my bills after my job had just moved the goalposts on some sales performance bonuses I had coming my way, dropping it effectively from $1,000 to $200. And now I'm the butthole who's going to keep the money that I won. I guess I'm not a team player. As a bonus, this was 4 hours drive from home, had an overnight stay, and one of those middle management jerks, in an example of what should be on or off the clock, said we shouldn't be paid for the drive to the retreat. Frick you. I was on the clock from the time I left Friday until I got home on Sunday. If you're forcing me to be somewhere as part of my job, it's all on the clock. My district manager didn't like that, and I was already looking for the door. What secret treasure did you uncover when you first moved into a new place? My house has a 2-person jacuzzi tub with mirrors on 3 walls around it. When I was looking at the house, there was a 4-poster canopy bed with a mirror inside the canopy. Needless to say, the previous owner had his thing. When I was moving in, I found a basement with a bar with cuffs on either end hanging from the ceiling and 2 eye bolts in a board on the floor that would have made this a perfect place to tie someone up for some more alternative fun. I strongly suspect that this is what it was used for. I have a room that used to be a bar. The previous owner took the bar itself with him despite it being built in. It has a dropped ceiling and the lights are above with clear panels to let the light through. I was moving ceiling tiles to change a bulb and I got hit in the face by what I'm guessing was a homemade adult bedroom swing that was bolted to the rafters above. I've been in this house 15 years and I still occasionally find a secret panel in a wall. It seems anywhere there was an extra bit of space, he put a removable panel to make hidden storage space. And despite all that, the single most surprising thing that I found in this house is the light switch in the bathroom that has power going to it, but doesn't seem to actually switch anything in the house on. What do, you mysterious switch? When will you stop taunting me and give up your secrets? I bet it turns the TV on and off at the neighbor's apartment. Not my house, but the school my friend worked at. A pipe had leaked and ruined a wall in a building, one of the oldest schools in the city. It was a beautiful property. Anyway, the pipe leaked, so they pulled down the ruined wall, and behind the wall they found a door. A fully furnished apartment was in there. It had a coal-burning stove to heat it, early 1900s appliances and decor. It was for the caretaker of the school. We have this side room next to some stairs. While we were moving stuff into the room, we noticed a piece of drywall was coming off the wall, so we took it off. Behind it and under the stair were some way old toys, most likely from the 50s. In the same house, about a year later, we paid a company to come put new insulation in the attic. When he was done, he told me we had a portion of our attic sealed off. So we busted through, found a super old sewing table and about 15 boxes of pine cones. My husband had a car that he bought off a friend. He had it for 4 years and the driver's side window started messing up and getting off track, so he popped the frame off it to fix it. In the door frame, we found a gat and 2 clips wrapped in a white t-shirt. We called the friend he bought it from, and it turns out the car was sold to her from a police auction. I mean, that's not an accessible place, so it's not like it was for emergencies. So was this a murder weapon or a really long-term security plan? Did you get a prepper's car? There's so many potential explanations now I think of it. An old friend of mine grew up in the house that I now own. I had no idea, but he struggled with severe mental illness from around high school onwards. His mum left a few boxes behind in the garage, and one of them was full of his old arrest information. Letters from his parole officer, and most depressingly, a letter from the judge recommending he be remanded to a psychiatric facility instead of prison. Apparently, he lived his adult years in a home for schizophrenics and died a few years ago. The whole thing was just very sad. Newspapers from World War II. A cardboard box with a special gag and handcuffs. This was after they'd sent a message through the realtor asking if I'd found a digital camera. I had not, but I'd be kind of curious or afraid to look at what was on it. Moved into an old house in Berkshire in the UK and found a Bible from the 1700s in the attic. In the back was handwritten the history of the early owners. The church in the village was 12th century and had all the records, so we tracked down the modern descendants and gave them the Bible. The couple were pretty much speechless when we gave it to them. The dates in the Bible started around 1750, so it was nearly 220 years old at the time that we found it. We found the family in the same village. I grew up in the middle of nowhere, southern Idaho. The farm my folks rented was very odd. There was a ton of old farm equipment from the 40s and 50s, as well as several, about 10, old 50s cars just scattered around the property and hidden in the tree line. The owner had a small shed on the property she asked us to never open. No worries, it sat between the garage and an old mobile home trailer that was never used. We moved away, and shortly after the owner died. New property owners went to the shed, found tons of old World War II and older equipment. Guns, bayonets, a Third Reich flag, all sorts of stuff. This shed even had an old-school dirt wall basement that had old radios and tons of other crazy stuff. Unfortunately, after the new owners started messing with the shed, the basement, being dirt and all, eventually gave way and a lot of stuff was damaged. They were able to salvage a lot and sold it all, so it worked out. The most I ever found was a previous tenant's adult magazine stash as a teenager in the old trailer. Best find ever. Hanging on the wall in the unfinished, closed-off part of the attic, we found a matted portrait of a man staring angelically off into space as he cradled a deer. Upon closer inspection, we realized that the man had an arrow through his hand where it lay over the deer, having protected it from injury. We call him Deer Man. My parents bought a home that used to be a funeral parlor almost 100 years ago. Dad had never questioned why there was a second bulkhead that went nowhere, and when there was a bust pipe, they finally had to cut it open. Inside, we found a small, walled-off room that had hundreds of old bottles, odd equipment, chemicals and perfumed salts, stained glass windows from the original building, and a few old ledgers and accounting books. My parents had no use for it, and a local antique shop owner and town historian happily took it when offered. We'd received some cool old copies of photos of how the house originally looked a few years later. After moving into our new house, we found around 14 grand behind the toilet. Apparently the person who lived in the house before us didn't believe in banks. I had a friend who found $200K cash in a paper bag in a bedroom closet in a rental in Shippen, Cove area of Stamford, Connecticut. They turned it into the cops and had to make a list of people they'd told in case that person came forward lying to say it was theirs. After a certain amount of time it was theirs, net of taxes, of course. An uncomfortably obvious crystal lab and a secret passageway. The walls had been gutted, leading from a bedroom closet to a linen closet close to the back door. Also in the same house, buried in a pile of crap, an antique piano from the early 1900s. Had it been kept in better condition, we were told it would have been worth at least 10 grand because that particular model was so rare. My mum bought her house 12 years ago, but last year my mentally unstable brother kicked the front door down. The door had a giant metal lock on it. It didn't work, we just used the deadbolt, but kept the lock on because the house was built in 1795 and looked cool. The lock broke off and a bunch of little papers and cards fell out of it. Among them were CIA ID badges, business cards that had to do with cryptography, and other things that had to do with the CIA. A few days later, I thought I'd look through the house in search of more CIA stuff and stumbled upon a World War II explosive round under one of the floorboards in the attic. That week was wild. The strangest thing we ever found was this really long, as in over a foot long, metal screw thing that was being used to hold the windows closed. We still have no idea what it could be used for. On the other hand, we buried all of our pets in the backyard, so the next person to move in has a bunch of tiny animal skeletons to discover when they start planting new trees or something. Earlier this year, I moved into a new apartment and found 4 unopened cans of 7-Up Gold in a gap between my kitchen cabinets and the wall. 7-Up Gold was discontinued in 1988. The seals on the cans had obviously failed long ago, and all of the liquid had evaporated or leaked out. There was about a quarter of a can left in one, but again, the seal was compromised and it was probably full of bacteria, so it wouldn't have been even remotely safe to drink. Razor blades. The double-edged ones from the old razors. They were in the wall when we opened it up to repair a busted pipe. I noticed a pile of debris in the wall and luckily happened to be wearing gloves. I reached in to grab the debris and throw it away and pulled out a handful of blades. There were several handfuls. I later learned a feature of mid-century modern bathrooms was a blade disposal slot in the back of the medicine cabinet. Super gross and creepy. Also, if you're going to move a bathroom wall in an MCM house, be on the lookout. A shotty and a Mary J grinder in the drop tile ceiling of the basement. Once again, this feels like a prepper thing. Worse ways to ride out the apocalypse than blasting out pellets while hopped up on the good herb, I guess. A box containing a ticket to the 1934 World Fair in Chicago. I'm not very tall. I was cleaning out my bathroom while preparing to move out of the house my family had rented for about 3 years. At the top of the closet, right at the back, were a balled-up pair of a stranger's used underwear that had apparently been there for at least 3 years that we'd lived there. That was gross. Found a full box of random crap in our basement of our apartment. Inside there was an Alcoholics Anonymous book filled with handwritten notes that progressively got less and less legible. Phone numbers, names, stories. We tried calling a few numbers and nobody answered. I think the woman died from her struggles. The previous owner's wife had passed away not long before we purchased the house. About a week after we took possession, the realtor called us and asked if we had found the owner's wife's wedding ring in the master bedroom closet. We had not. A few years later, we were cleaning on top of the kitchen cabinets and found the ring. Why it was on top of one of the kitchen cabinets, we'll never know. We were able to track down the owner and return it, however. We found a stack of acrylic paintings in the basement, all very amateurish. Subjects ranged from creepy little girls to 70s psychedelic undressed ladies. Realtor told the owners to pick them up or they'd end up in the trash. They showed up a year later asking for them. Bonus, junk removal guy loved the 70s undressed pictures and asked to keep them. We rented this one, didn't buy. Moved in and found a large sign in the rafters of the garage that had the words, Crystal House. It certainly helped connect the dots with everything else wrong with the place. You can submit your own stories to be featured here on the channel. The story submission link is in the description below, and if you want to listen to some vibey music in the background, check out easymode, also linked below, and subscribe. We didn't realize it while touring and doing our walkthrough, but all of the bedroom locks were from the outside. Every bedroom had a medicine cabinet as well. Oh, our house had that as well, sort of. 2 ground floor bedrooms could be locked from the outside and not unlocked in any way from inside the bedrooms. One bedroom had French doors leading to the yard, and one had a very large window that could be easily used as an entrance or exit, so it's not like they were interested in keeping people locked inside the rooms. More like, once there was someone inside of the rooms, they couldn't get into the rest of the house. The bedrooms also had motion detectors wired into the electrical systems that would set off an alarm. The disarm panel was by the front door. At the back of the drawer in the kitchen, we also found a copy of a restraining order against a family member that had required that person to relinquish all firearms. I have to assume these things were all related. Not a house, but a car. Bought home a used 2000 Explorer with a couple thousand miles on it. Saw a piece of paper behind the plastic of the glove compartment, back where the light bulb is. I carefully pulled it out. It's a white envelope. Inside is roughly $1,000 in various bills. We called the dealership to ask them what to do, but for some reason they either could not contact the seller of the vehicle, or the seller of the vehicle refused to be contacted. I wanted to turn it in because $1,000 really frickin' helped me out. I'd be financially devastated if I lost that much. That was a good year. Huh. My kids found a crawl space up in my bedroom. They found Ken dolls with their hands melted and razors embedded. I did my best to lighten the freakishness and joked that Sid from Toy Story must have lived there. Change. So much change. Countless pennies, nickels, and dimes, with the occasional quarter sprinkled in. All in the ground around the house. To clarify, it was all coins from recent years, 60s, 70s, 80s, and so on. My family bought the house from a sweet couple who had a lot of foster children coming in and out of their home. We found toys, knives, contraceptives, and so much more in and around the house. Anytime we dug around the house, we knew we were going to find something odd. Maybe it was a house my husband lived in. It was like living with Sonic the Hedgehog. Coins bursting everywhere. A .38 revolver hidden in a closet. Had a police officer friend run the serial number. Turns out it was stolen in a home burglary in 1973. We found it in 1998. We bought our house in September last year. About this time last year, our cat started playing with this little wooden thing that he'd found. We had no idea what he was playing with, but when we walked over to see what it was, it turned out to be a little dreidel. We'd never seen it before, but that's when our cat let us know that he was Jewish. A colorized, as in the colors were filled in by hand, very large black and white photograph in an ornate gilded frame found in the attic. The photo showed a young child in a white lacy dress wearing a cowboy hat and boots, standing on the steps of a city building, think brownstone, with a pony. The house was in the Midwest and not near a city where such buildings might be found. It was an old photo, and you couldn't tell if this was a girl or a boy, since boys used to wear dresses. But what you could tell, and could not be denied, was that the child was the ugliest child any of us had ever seen. Scary ugly. I wasn't even envious about the pony. That kid was just so ugly. We hung the photo in a prominent spot and we'd make up a story about the person and pony photo, taking turns. We left that thing in the attic when we sold the house. It didn't seem right to take it. When I was mad at my parents, I knew that I'd forgive them and forget why I was ever mad in the first place. So in my anger, I conceived this plan to write down why they made me mad on a tiny piece of paper and hide it so I could rediscover it someday. I hid these little reminders in the wooden slats of my closet door. I'd stuff them in the little cracks of the baseboard, in between any chipping or peeling paint and the wall, and I never really discovered any of them. Whatever poor soul that bought the house after I graduated high school got to discover all the causes of my teenage angst. We bought a lovely but run-down old Victorian house. On the 3rd floor, the attic that we turned into an actual living space, there was "Kill You" written in crayon on the wall. It also had a secret stairway to the attic in the closet of one of the bedrooms. This was something we discovered ourselves when renovating it. We found the down staircase and then followed it to the nailed-shut door inside the closet. Very cool house, but in a crappy neighborhood. We eventually moved. There was no sign of hauntings. You know, you could have at least decorated that attic full of creepy memorabilia, placed a spooky-looking doll in a chalk pentagram, nailed the other door shut, and just left this as a story for someone else to write in the future. You missed an opportunity there. When my parents bought our house, they found old crates for oranges from 1957 in our basement. They bought the house in 2000. I've still got the crates. 10 years I've lived in my house, but until recently I'd never been in the attic. It had a push-up hatch, rather than a pull-down or ladder combo, so it wasn't very accessible. There was a weird smell one day and I was afraid something might have passed away up there, so I pulled out a ladder, lifted the hatch and poked my head up there to check it out. Right next to the hatch in the attic was a huge pile of what looked like stuffing, but it turned out to be a gigantic, as in 6 or 7 foot, stuffed person. Like the biggest voodoo doll that there ever was, but all white. I tried moving it around a bit to get it out of the way, because it was insanely heavy and hard to move. It was torn in places and full of 100 years of dust, stuffing, and whatever the heck else, so yeah. I just left it in there, closed the hatch, and called it a day. The attic was full of doll heads. I left them in there for the next owner. My cousin found an honest-to-gosh hidden room. A bookshelf swung forward and revealed an unfinished place under the stairs. It had a water glass and some Star Wars books from 1996 in it. My friend's dad found an urn full of ashes in the basement of their house. The urn had a plaque on it with the word baby and an angel. The previous owner had left the urn there with the ashes of their young one. My friend's dad displayed the urn in their living room. They eventually sold the house and moved away, but her dad took the urn. He displays it on his mantel. I can't find a picture right now, but there was a small cardboard box with several dozen headshots clipped from a very old newspaper in the rafters of my 1915 home. They were all the same photo of a young woman from the neck up, about 2 inches square. Several were pasted into a little leather book on each page. Also, a spoon with what was probably smack residue and Q-tips in an old dresser. Also, what was probably a small crystal lab in the basement with mirrors and holes strategically placed to make it easier to see if someone entered the house. Also, 15 disgusting mattresses that I had to dispose of. I bought a smack house. A child-sized WWE belt. Despite purchasing my first home and now being several years' worth of salary in debt for the first time, I was most interested in how I could possibly wear such a fine article of clothing to work the next day. You should have hung it over your shoulder and walked through the office. Instant respect. They'll know not to let their kids mess with you. When I lived in a townhouse a few years ago, my roommate and I noticed a message scratched into the side of the refrigerator. Find the X. We searched that place high and low and never found an X. I really hope it was someone messing with us, because if I moved out and never found the buried treasure, I'm going to be so mad. A USB drive belonging to the previous owner. It held 30 photos of his car and one of his wife and baby. Unexploded World War II parachute bomb. Had to have the bomb squad come out and collect it. There was a kitchen hidden behind a wall, fully furnished, with a dead mouse under the table that was practically mummified. A mostly full bottle of old toothache drops that have chloroform in them. For me, it was between a sign found on the basement ceiling that simply said, "Do not hump," and the crib in the attic with the dead baby mouse in it. When I was young and we were moving, I didn't feel like cleaning my room, so I stuffed a bunch of knickknacks and some mildly dirty underwear into a hole in the wall before we patched it up. I hope someone finds my treasure one day. We found a small wooden box filled with black and white photos. The photos were of the previous owners along with another couple in various states of undress and compromising positions. The box also contained a couple of teeth. That was a strange day. A soldier's pocket Bible from 1863, mint condition, gold-leafed, with an inscription from his sister. I assume it was a soldier's Bible, as another pass has Fort Ganley, VA, written on it. It was found resting on the beam on an open wall of a garage in the year 1976. It was given to me as a kid, and I put it in a box and kept it with my other real treasures. I found a VHS tape from a defunct rental store in the basement. Somebody stashed it away by the wood boards of the ceiling and left it there after moving. Part of me felt I was about to get cursed from the Ring ghost, but popped it into the old VCR anyways. I started it at a halfway point and found some crazy 80s adult movie. Couldn't stop laughing at the absurdity of it. I also found, next to the tape, an old schematic map of the house before some of the additions. Interesting, but I feel it's more of a usual thing to find in a house. I was taking down some old ceiling tiles in my basement one fine summer day. Things were going surprisingly well. No bugs, mice, or asbestos, until I shifted the tile that's directly above the boiler. I saw something rolling off the tile and felt it hit my shoulder. I looked down, and in a small pile of dust and paper debris was a wooden marital aid. a sizable and clearly used wooden marital aid. Now, I was still holding the tile above my head and realized that it was heavier than what the last few had been. Great. I definitely wasn't expecting a fleet enema, old and yellowed contraceptives, or the mice nest made with shredded adult magazines that was containing all the previously mentioned items. It was like I was holding a platter of nightmares. The next tile held far more books and magazines. I called the police once I found some illegal, unsafe for YouTube material. They ended up taking away a whole box of books, magazines, film negatives, and loose photos. They did leave me with the wooden toy though. Mercy. That basement still gives me the creeps sometimes. What were the most surprising things for deaf people who gained hearing later on in life? My cousin was born deaf and went through an operation to recover part of his hearing when he was 12. He sometimes uses hearing aids, but he can get by without them in general. His family had a bunny, Tupu. Of course, he'd learned about cows mooing, cats meowing, all the usual farmyard animals before he'd had his surgery. He was very shocked when he came home and greeted his bunny that it made no sound. It took the longest time for him to understand that bunnies are pretty quiet animals in general. He explained that he thought all pets were loud. My old roommate in New York City got implants at, I think he was 25 or 26. He was shocked that the radiators in the house didn't make noise. He could feel them and was absolutely sure, given their shaking and vibrating from time to time, that they were going to be quite noisy. On the flip side, he was deeply annoyed by the buzz of fluorescent lighting, which he did not expect to make that much noise. I had a child friend that gained hearing, and she didn't realize you could control the volume of your voice. So when I whispered to her, she said, "Hang on, I think I need to adjust my hearing aid." At first I just thought, oh, it mustn't be working, until I realized what was going on. She whispered to me for about 2 weeks solid just to practice. Yes, she also practiced shouting, but we did that in secluded woodlands. My friend got his hearing at age 6. He swears to this day that he thought flowers would make some sort of noise, and that's what attracted bees. Nernroot makes a sound to attract adventurers, actually. I went deaf due to illness, probably around the age of 4 months. Got my hearing back at around 8 years old through surgery. I used to think traffic lights should make a noise. Street signs too. Like when a stop sign has a blinking light for added visibility, I think that's actually where I got the idea in my head. They're trying to get your attention, right? So of course they must put sirens in all the traffic lights. My mum says I used to hold my ears when we'd drive through an intersection, though I don't remember that part. I've been wondering if when all of these people get their hearing, whether it's as sensitive as a child's or maybe kind of dulled because of the surgical nature of the correction. The fact that some of these people seem quite distressed by sirens or fluorescent lights suggests the former. Well, after my cochlear implant, I started hearing a lot of things that I never knew existed. But here are a few things that I thought would make a noise, but they didn't. First, I expected the light bulbs to hiss or a flickering sound when you turn them on, and I was so disappointed. Second, I thought you could hear your eyes close, like a blink, but there's no sound when you close your eyelids. There's no whoosh. Third, you know how wind makes a noise going through trees? I thought it would make more noises going through hair. Nope. Fourth, now I could hear soft sounds, but I still get spooked when I see a bug crawling and I don't hear it. They don't make a noise at all. And finally, going number 2 does not make a sound, only the splash into the toilet. I thought the body makes a noise to push it out. I was disappointed. I got waterproof hearing aids. Taking a shower scared the ever-loving Christ out of me. I have a cochlear implant on one side, hearing aid on the other. I don't use waterproof unless I go swimming. One time after swimming, I decided to keep them on when I was showering, and I got shivers down my spine. My daughter suffered from recurring ear infections that went on for over a year before I could get the doctors to push for tubes in her ears. I felt that she was either unable to hear that, or it was very muffled. The doctor that placed the tubes confirmed my suspicions, stating that she most likely heard noise as though she was underwater. I cannot attest to what exactly she expected to make a noise, but I still tear up when I think about her face as she re-explored the entire house with renewed fascination. I can, however, give my subjective opinion based on her facial expressions. The thing that sticks out the most is the refrigerator. She was in awe over the humming noise that thing makes, a noise that we often tune out because we're so accustomed to it, right? As she focused on that appliance for a bit, she made her way around to everything else that was large and stood in front of it as if she was expecting everything to have its own secret noise. I can't say for sure, but the amount of time that she stayed with her face pressed up against the inactive washing machine and dryer leads me to believe with almost certainty that she was expecting those to hum and whir as well. At her age, you wouldn't expect her to make a correlation between similarly sized appliances, but I'll be damned if it didn't appear that way. I had a friend who was born deaf but got hearing aids. She always thought people yawning was people randomly screaming, so it always confused her why people would be screaming in the library, movies, at church, and in public. She never asked why people were screaming because she thought it was normal. After she got the hearing aid, she thought she'd be hearing people scream when they yawned. A former coworker went to RIT, where they've got a school for the deaf. In the summertime, hearing all of the deaf students loudly doing the deed with the windows open because they don't realize how loud they are was one of the funniest things going on there, according to him. My coworker and her husband are both deaf, but none of her 4 kids are. I can only imagine the noises those kids hear. I have friends that go to RIT, and I used to visit them regularly. Can confirm, the deaf kids are real loud. Candles or fire? I regained my hearing at the age of 2, so I was absolutely heartbroken when I discovered that birthday candles did not make any sounds while burning. Also, I expected flashing lights to make some sort of noise. Not really sure what I expected exactly, but maybe like a siren or a loud bang. I couldn't hear until I was about 4 years old. I remember being surprised that trains were relatively quiet for their size. Question: if you lose your hearing, can you still have tinnitus? That would be a nightmare to have ringing in your ear without any other sound to mitigate it. Okay, a quick Google search has brought up, being hearing impaired doesn't exempt you from these kinds of sounds, unfortunately. Deaf people are more likely to have tinnitus, in fact. It's thought to be linked to the damage that caused the deafness itself. I got my hearing at 7, and I thought that grass would make a squeaky noise when you stepped on it. I was a weird kid. My dad progressively went deafer as his life went on, and was almost 100% deaf by around age 20. He got a cochlear implant when I was around 7 years old, put them in, asked my mum, "Are the kids always this damn loud?" and proceeded to take the cochlear implant off so he didn't have to listen to my little brother and I yelling. I always thought that was funny. I was born with tons of fluid in my ears and only had very slight hearing at best. When I was 6 months old, I had a surgery that put tubes in my ears to drain said fluid. My mum says that when I came home from surgery, I went to my toy box and shook every toy in it to see what sounds they made. Honestly, it wasn't that serious, but it did lead to some auditory processing issues, and I had to see a speech therapist until I was 7. Crazy what a difference 6 months of hearing makes that early on. My 3-year-old son is deaf, and we just had a visit this morning from his signing teacher, who's also deaf herself. She recently had cochlear implants fitted, and while we were talking and signing, she said, I'm sorry, I can't concentrate. I can hear a horrible constant noise. It's not stopped the whole time I've been here. Turns out it was the rain on my conservatory roof. Okay, this is furthering the idea that when people get their hearing back, they get complete spidey sense. Although on reflection, I'm sure depending on the procedure and whether they had hearing beforehand, there's a large degree of difference. Not me, but when I was in high school, a bunch of kids would meet in a nearby no man's land and hang out before school started. I spent most of my mornings loudly talking to my almost deaf friend. One day he showed up and said he had a new hearing aid. I didn't have to yell at him to get him to hear me anymore. Yay! A few minutes later, he asked what that noise was. I asked which noise, listening and hearing nothing out of the ordinary. I don't know, it's like a weird beeping, almost musical. Really bizarre, but actually kind of pleasing. Took me a minute to realize that my man was hearing bird song for the first time in his life. That was a pretty cool moment. My dad was born with severe hearing loss, but it wasn't detected until he was 50. His parents just thought he was ignorant if he didn't answer them. It's quite sad, actually. His parents definitely failed him. He's also dyslexic, and it's affected every part of his life and self-worth. Anywho, my mum told him he needed a hearing test because the TV was starting to deafen her. She thought, oh, it's just years of loud music and using a shotgun occasionally. So he has this hearing test and some other tests and gets told he's actually born deaf in one ear and has significant loss in the other. He can't hear phonics. You can imagine his problems through life. He finally gets hearing aids, and the first day he sits down and eats a packet of crisps, and he absolutely flips out. What the F is that noise? Holy crap, my head is exploding. We had to explain that you can hear the crunching of food and stuff, and some foods are louder than others. It was heartbreaking to see what he's missed out on. Now he only uses his hearing aids after a good nag from my mum. We still have to put up with his noisy eating, but he's back to ignorance is bliss. My godfather and dad's lifelong best friend. He was born with hearing, but lost it before age 2 due to some health issues. Went his entire childhood deaf, and in his 20s he finally got a hearing aid. At the time, he and his wife were living in the downtown of a large city. Apparently, he had it about 2 weeks before he threw it out, saying everything was too loud, he hated the noise and sound, and that things were more peaceful without it. 15 years later, he moved out into the country on a few hundred acres of wood. Still, he refused to wear a hearing aid and kept refusing for the next 10 years. Finally, his wife convinced him to give it a try, and his mind was blown. He couldn't believe how quiet everything was and how much he enjoyed hearing. He finally explained that he thought the noise of the traffic downtown was the wind and that it would sound like that everywhere all the time. So for more than 25 years, he thought wind sounded like hundreds of cars driving by. You can submit your own stories to be featured here on the channel. The story submission link is in the description below. And if you want to listen to some vibey music in the background, check out easymode, also linked below, and subscribe. My girlfriend is not deaf, but she is hard of hearing, which for her means that she can't hear high-frequency sounds. She recently got hearing aids that amplify the frequencies that she can't hear, and was shocked to find out that birds and crickets chirp, to the point that she thought the birds were trying to attack her and was horrified that we were surrounded by millions of bugs when I explained what the crickets were. It just goes to show what peace of mind one could obtain from not hearing, and how deaf or hard of hearing people interpret the world completely differently than people who hear normally do. These comments have been super interesting. I never thought about this before. I hope your girlfriend's been able to put her mind at rest about the birds and crickets. One of my newly hearing-enabled friends basically said, "How the frick do you normies stand all of this noise?" I swear I've read somewhere that most people expect the sun to make noise, but for the life of me I can't seem to remember where. I mean, if Teletubbies is to be believed, it makes the sound of a laughing baby. I thought it would make a sizzling sound. It's a giant ball of fire. It's hard not to think it makes any noise at all. I was deaf for a very long amount of time, but when I got some machine to fix it, I don't know what it's called, I was just very annoyed by everything. The things I least expected to make noise were just walking and water flowing. One of my close friends in high school has a younger sister who used to be deaf before she got cochlear implants. We were watching a silent movie for a film class, and her younger sister thought that all of those movies made noise. She ran out thinking she was deaf again. We watched it at her home for an assignment. We were pretty quiet. The younger sister just panicked to see a movie playing and no noise because her experience is that movies are real loud. Only realized that she could still hear after she heard the door close. I can't remember what I expected to make noise, but first time I had hearing aids, I found out scratching my skin, brushing my hair, and opening the door made noises. I got freaked out by birds as well. Kitchens are real noisy. I remember trying to figure out a bizarre sound to be described, and it was just bubbling water. Oh, and when people smile, it makes a noise I can only describe as a click as the lips brush against the teeth. It took me 6 years to figure out what it was whilst going from straight-faced to smiling in the mirror with hearing aids on. Open-mouthed smile only. My friends and colleagues love that I can hear them smiling without looking at them now. I was born with impaired hearing, but had an operation to fix it when I was very young. My dad loves to tell the story of me coming home for the first time with clear hearing. I get home, go to the bathroom, do my thing and flush. Except, I'd never heard a toilet flush before. I bolted out of there in tears, screaming for my parents because I couldn't handle the shock that the toilet makes that much noise. I had a cousin who was born deaf and got her hearing fixed at the age of 9. I don't know how, but surgery, I think. They didn't realize that everything made noises. Wind, water, breathing, chewing, and they were annoyed for a few weeks, but then got used to it. My son got hearing aids just about 6 months ago. He had mid-range hearing loss at about 50% total loss. He was shocked at how much noise rain makes. He was also surprised to learn that when he rubs his hand across fabric or leather seats or clothes, that it makes a noise. The poor kid, he had to discover background noise at 12 and then go through the process of making it background noise. The biggest change for him was learning that people have different voices. He could generally tell male from female, but he said that basically all women sounded the same and men all sounded the same as well. I guess vocal timbre was completely absorbed by his hearing loss. Chewing and chomping food, the most annoying noise ever. I had no clue people could make so much noise while eating. Some of them more than others. It still blows my mind how many grown adults make Homer Simpson-like eating noises. But due to the super sensitive hearing factor we've chatted about earlier, I wonder if newly hearing-enabled folks basically find everyone's eating noises repulsive. I thought my member would make a squirting sound when I peed, and I didn't expect just to have a splashing sound instead when I got my hearing back at age 6. Farting became one of my favorite things, and I understood why people would frown at me when I did it. I am profoundly deaf. Born deaf with no residual hearing whatsoever. I had hearing aids that amplified sounds by 140 decibels, and even if I stood next to a jet engine, I wouldn't hear a thing, though I'd feel all of the vibrations. I get a cochlear implant back in 1994 when I was 14. I'm 39 now, so that's 25 years ago. I can hear absolutely anything. If I turned my processor's sensitivity up to maximum, I'd hear my heart beating and breathing. I had problems with hearing fluorescent tubes buzzing loudly when my audiology discovered they made a mistake with the sensitivity levels. Despite being able to hear anything, I can't understand speech at all unless I can lip-read the speaker, where I can understand 50 to 75% of people's speech, as opposed to less than 5% without the processor on. Then there were the surprising things. I'm used to sounds now, but after my big switch on, I was surprised by a range of sounds like the kettle boiling, microwave beeping, the keyboard clicking, things like that. I was most surprised by the noise of indicators in cars. The ticking noise by the indicator was the most surprising. What confused me the most, though, was when I heard this tick-tocking noise, then a quiet roar, then silence, and then the tick-tock would slowly start up again, get a bit more rapid, then the quiet roar, and the cycle would repeat itself several times. I got confused and asked my mum. She laughed and said the tennis was on the TV in the bedroom next door. The quiet roar was the clapping by the spectators. I once read about a deaf guy who expected the sun to be very loud, and he never imagined that showers were that loud either. My friend was not born deaf, but lost his hearing due to a lifetime of loud, heavy equipment use. He was in his 60s when he finally relented and got himself a hearing aid. He stopped by my office to exclaim how much better life was since receiving the device. "I can hear the breeze and the birds again," he says. "Rain, water trickling in brooks, it's all back. I feel like a young man again. There's so much detail to sound that I'd forgotten all about." "That's wonderful," I exclaim. "What kind is it?" He looks at his watch and says, about 3:45. I wasn't born deaf, but developed chronic ear infections in my left ear around 6 months of age, and as a result, my eardrum and bones of hearing were completely destroyed, and left me almost completely deaf in my left ear by the time I was 5 to 6. As a result, I never really got to know what it was like to hear in stereo. At the age of 28, I had a surgery that was able to replace the bones of hearing with a single titanium piece and rebuild an eardrum. I was told it would take 6 months for my brain to relearn how to interpret the audio signal. But when I woke from surgery, I was instantly assaulted by what felt like a wall of sound. It was quite painful. At the time, I had 3 kids, ages 8, 5, and 3. One of the biggest shocks to me was the sheer volume of noise that my children could make. The first day we were home, I turned to my husband and asked, "Have our kids always been this loud?" The other biggest shock was surround sound. A year or so before my surgery, my husband had gone out and spent a good sum of money on a surround sound system for our house. I was livid. What a waste of money. The first time we watched a movie in surround sound after my surgery, however, I was in awe. My husband just laughed at me as I kept turning from side to side, saying, "Did you hear that? Things are actually moving around the room." When the movie was finished, I sat in stunned silence for a moment before turning to him and saying, "Oh, I get it. That was worth every penny." My professor, who is deaf, said that she came home one day from class and her roommate asked her if she was hungry. The professor said, "Yes, I'm starving. I haven't eaten all day, but how do you know?" The roommate explained that she could hear her stomach grumbling. My professor freaks out that her organs make noise and other people can hear inside her body. My class was dying from laughter. I was born with hearing, but I began losing it when I turned 1, and my parents didn't realize that I wasn't able to hear anymore. But when they finally figured out that I couldn't actually hear and got bilateral cochlear implants, I was very surprised to find out that bugs, like ants and spiders and the like, don't make noise. I always just assumed that if you could feel something move, it had to make a noise. I was born deaf and got a cochlear implant when I was 27. I can hear better, but I rely on lip reading as well. I had no idea that going to the bathroom makes so much noise and that people could hear all kinds of embarrassing noises. It explains many weird looks I got before. I sometimes work with a guy with a deaf son who got a cochlear implant. He thought people were mispronouncing the word for because it didn't rhyme with hour. Even for a lifelong hearer, that's a good question. Was born with hearing loss. I'm in my mid-30s now and I recently got 2 hearing aids. I had no idea that the world was so loud. Apparently the elevators at work make a beeping sound when they arrive at their destination. And a loud one too. Papers make noise as well if you look through them. I had no idea. And when my cat parades around the house, I hear its nails on the wooden floor. Flushing a toilet is so loud, I'll take my aids out before I do it. I was born deaf but received an implant early, at 2.5 years old. I expect everything to make noises, but I didn't expect the night to be that creepy. I stayed up during the night to watch TV and, my god, too many different noises. I'm glad I can't hear during the night when I turn that thing off. I have a question for you non-deaf people. How do you sleep at night with all these noises? It must be scary as hell. Well, I'm only hearing impaired, but god damn the world is noisy. There's nothing better than coming home, taking out your hearing aids, and finally letting your brain relax. But the thing that surprised me the most was how loud toilet flushes are and damn crunchy leaves in the fall. When did you convince everyone that you were, in fact, an actual wizard? While standing directly in front of one of 5 elevators at work, I was asked, "What makes you think it's going to be that one?" To which I responded very seriously, "I always know." Right as the doors opened, and it made me look like some sort of Jedi. One time I had a girl in my car that I really liked and wanted to impress. Now this was in the late 1980s when CD players in cars were really new. I had a custom installation that worked pretty well, but it had some flaws. In particular, I had to hit the play button whenever I turned on the car. Then the amp wouldn't kick in for about 30 seconds for some reason. So I was in the habit of hitting the play button ASAP as I turned on the car so the tunes would start up. So we got in my car, a Mustang convertible at the time, and as usual I hit the play button as soon as I started the car. But having done this literally hundreds of times, I was very fast and fluid at it, and the girl didn't even notice that I'd done that. So we pull away, driving down the Pacific Coast Highway in Southern California along the ocean, as I recall. So the girl says, "Hey, how about some music?" I knew the amp was about to kick in, so without even glancing at her, I snapped my fingers in front of the CD player, and the timing was perfect. The music immediately started up. My expression never changed, like I expect magic things to happen at the snap of my fingers all the time. She just stared at the CD player, stared at me, and then just shook her head with a little laugh. I felt like the smoothest king of the smooth people. On the tennis court, I'm about 3 courts away from the basket of tennis balls when I take a ball out, say loudly to my friend, "And now I will take this ball and I will serve it into the basket." I toss the ball up and hit it in the general direction of the basket. That crap goes straight into the basket like a guided missile. The look on his face as I was elevated to godlike status was amazing. We were jumping around a little bit after that. Once I sneezed in class and the lights went out. I was whacking the old mule once and this happened right as I arrived at my destination. For this reason, I've refrained from having relations with any women due to the obvious might of my climaxes. At least, that's what I tell myself. Thank you for writing in, and thank you for your sacrifice. Your celibacy is the only thing standing between your city's power grid and complete destruction. I was sitting in my brother's apartment and this big fly came buzzing into the room. He said, "That frickin' fly has been driving me crazy for 2 days." Before he'd even finished saying it, I reached into the air and grabbed the fly. Then, without saying a word, walked over to the window and let it go outside, sat back down and continued the conversation. Cook dropped a plate of food and I managed to catch it before it hit the ground without a single piece of food falling from the plate. Graceful like a swan, motherfricker. Swans are loud, awkwardly long-necked honking beasts which reportedly taste delicious. I have never understood why they're the symbol of grace. When my son was about 8 years old, I Jedi mind-tricked him to sleep. It was about 2:30 in the morning and he was very angry and very tired. I said, "Noah, it's time you went to sleep," and I waved my hand in front of his face. As soon as my hand went over his face, he was asleep. It was amazing, but my wife didn't believe me when I told her the next morning. Sometimes I pick up the phone and fix problems instantly. For example, "Hello, CIT service desk, how can I help?" "Oh, hi, sorry, what's the issue?" "Oh, don't worry, it works." "Okay, thanks." I worked in an arcade for a while, and this effect was localized to one single game tech named Larry. When the machines would break down without explanation, we would all spend hours tweaking around with them. Sure enough, Larry would walk over and start it up without incident. Those machines would then be marked with an AOL sticker, standing for Afraid of Larry. I feel like this is going to be pretty common, but I always try to guess where the train doors are going to stop, or subway or similar railed vehicles. I'll pick a spot and stand next to the platform edge, and when the train comes whooshing up, everyone does that slow shuffle towards where it looks like the nearest door will stop. When it works, I end up with a sudden crowd around me and the center of the doors right in front of me, without moving a muscle. I mean, I doubt anyone notices or cares, but I take significant satisfaction in it. I was in 9th grade and I'd just gotten a digital watch. I spent an unhealthy amount of time making sure that my watch was perfectly synced to the school's clock, which was displayed on the classroom's television mounted in the corner. Since that clock didn't show the seconds, I'd sit there, watch in hand, waiting for the moment the minute number jumped forward. When it did, I would immediately alter the time on my watch as well. So one day during English class, we were talking about when we get out of class. I don't know why, but the discussion got kind of heated for such a stupid subject. One kid was adamantly insisting that we wouldn't get out for at least 2 minutes, but I know, from glancing at my watch, that we were going to get out in 12 seconds. I told him that and he just scoffed. So I started counting down. 5, he just laughed at me. 4, people stopped talking and looked at me. 3, students started rotating in their seats to look at the time. 2, I started to get nervous. What if I was wrong? 1. Silence within the area we were sitting in, butterflies in my stomach, the kid's expression suddenly turning nervous. And then a half second after, I started panicking about being wrong and never living this down, when the bell rang. I used to be a goalkeeper at high school. I'm from Brazil. Me and my fellow teammates, my friends, were joking and playing with the soccer balls before a match, and for some reason I was doing fake karate kung fu stances and moves. I was facing the goal. Most of my friends were behind the goal, and did a punch move only to repel an incoming ball my friend kicked to hit me in the back. It was pretty sweet. Whenever a new person gets into my car, at some point during the drive I'll start singing some random classic oldie song. Then I give my passenger the old, "watch this" look, as I change the radio to the oldie station as if I knew the song I was singing would be playing. This has worked for me once in my entire life, and damn it did I feel like an absolute legend. The best one I've ever seen was done by my dad. Mum, Dad, and I were standing in the kitchen having a conversation. Dad casually reaches up and pulls a plate out of the cabinet, not in any hurry, turns to me, finishes a sentence, reaches out into midair over the toaster completely unprompted, toast pops up, Dad snatches the toast out of midair, takes the most satisfied bite I've ever seen and strolls off like a champ. And yeah, the most popular comment I'm getting is, "What toaster do you have that shoots toast up into midair?" This would have been in the mid-90s sometime. The toaster was an older model. The toast did not shoot into the air but did spring up suddenly. Toast can catch a little air this way, which is precisely what happened, and Dad had his hand over the toaster such that he caught it at the apogee of its path without needing to wait for it. Using the London Underground cards while they were hidden in my glove. You can tell when a red light is about to turn green by looking at the "don't walk" light lateral to it. It begins to flash right before the light changes. When I'd be at a red light when my kids were little, I'd hold out my hands and say, "green," and it would turn. And they thought I was a god. And now they roll their eyes at me. I was walking through the 7-Eleven with my friends one day when for some reason a small package of food started to fall off the shelf next to us. Without thinking or turning my head, I instantly reached my hand out and the package landed perfectly in my hand. I am Spider-Man. I dodged a paintball once, Matrix style. I leant back as I saw it coming and it flew gracefully over my head. Then I got shot in the family jewels. But for a third of a second, I was God. Kinda feels like the realistic outcome of what should have happened in The Matrix 2, to be honest. I mean, it wouldn't have been nearly as cool, but I would have died laughing in the cinema. That dumb agent just had to go for the thigh and get a gloat in. One of my friends had just started dating one of the cool car dudes at my high school. Me being more of a lame nerd girl, I had a bit of a hard time fitting in with this new crowd, especially since my knowledge of cars was very sparse. Well, one evening as the big group of car dudes and a few of my girl buddies met up, I felt utterly misplaced. One of the boys started telling a tale of woe about a part of his engine, no idea which, so don't ask, that had gone missing, and judging by the solemn mood of his crew, it nearly felt like a relative had died. Suddenly, one of my friends pipes up, "Vira can find it, she does that, she's totally magic." All eyes on me. What she was speaking of was my little parlor trick and knack of guessing where people put their stuff based on what I know about them. Absolutely not magical, but a fun trick that I thought would stay between us girls only. I was probably 50 shades of whooped butt in the face when I figured out I should just go for it. Nothing could really go bad. They couldn't ignore me more than they already did. During the evening, I'd observed that this guy was clumsy, slightly dazed, and preoccupied. He'd dropped at least 3 things on the floor in just a couple of hours, and he'd forgotten to buy snacks, and he always asked, "Huh?" after someone spoke to him. So I said, "You tossed it out. In a garbage bag near where you work on your car," I said with more confidence than I felt. As it was his house, he left to go to the garage and came back holding a bag. A black garbage bag. And I'm not bullcrapping you, it was in there. The whole room oohed and awed, and no, I didn't get off with the hottest bloke there, nor suddenly become less nerdy. But after that, they didn't ignore me. To them, I was cool. And I didn't mind letting them think I was magic, because, to be honest, I frickin' felt magic. In short, a story in which I Sherlock some cool car dudes. I went to instant message one of my friends and for some reason decided to start the conversation with, "That's what she said," completely out of the blue. Apparently he was typing a complaint about his work to me at the same time, so literally less than a second after I hit enter, my friend sent, "Man, this is so hard." For about 6 lines after that, I kept writing random lines and they all worked. It was something like, "That's what she said. Man, this is so hard. Because I'm a wizard. How did you do that? Creepily awesome. Okay, that's creepy. What the frick?" And then he logs off. It only ever happened once, but once was enough. You can submit your own stories to be featured here on the channel. The story submission link is in the description below. And if you want to listen to some vibey music in the background, check out easymode, also linked below, and subscribe. Once I was hanging out at a friend's house, imbibing substances and alcohol and enjoying the subtle nuance of Guitar Hero. A reasonable-sized group of us were there that night. I was wailing away to At the Drive-In's One-Armed Scissor. My friend Rocky was on bass. When I asked my twin sister, who was somewhere behind me, "What's the greatest thing in the world?" Cookies?" she responds. For a moment, I don't acknowledge what just happened until the solo came in. It's a rather simple solo, so I was able to rest my plucking hand and just tap that crap out. I didn't consider this some brave feat until Rocky looked at me with the respect eyes and expressed his envy and considerable impression. As I was tapping that solo out, my newly freed hand reaches into my pocket and pulls out its contents. As it happens, it's some small package of Oreo cookies. I throw this package behind my shoulder to my sister to the utter amazement of the group. Since that day, my friends regard me with the suspicion and mistrust due to a wizard. At a friend's party and everyone's having a good time. I'm practicing through the fire and flames on Expert on Guitar Hero. No one's paying attention to me, but someone calls my name from the adjacent room. The solo is playing, but I practice this song twice a day, so I go into the kitchen to see who called my name. My friend was just wondering where I was, but I hear behind me, "Who the frick is playing Guitar Hero?" I walk back into the room with everyone staring at me because I only missed one note for the whole 20 seconds of the solo that I was gone for. I didn't think I'd memorized it. When I'm too lazy to get up to get something, I'll just say, "The Force will get it for me," and be annoying about it. Eventually, a friend will just bring it to me, to which I reply, "The Force has a strong effect on the weak-minded." I'm the mother of a toddler, a 3-year-old, and anybody with kids can tell you that this will hone your reflexes to a sharp point. I can catch dropped objects in an instant without looking, much like Jolie in Mr. and Mrs. Smith. This is only particularly impressive when the dropped object is a full drink, but whatever. I'm also an expert at dodging thrown objects and navigating Lego-strewn rooms with amazing speed and agility. Oh, and the whole "Mum has eyes in the back of her head" thing? It's because you learn to hear that crap. I can hear the snack container in the pantry being opened from the laundry room with the washer and dryer running, so don't even try it. I stare at traffic and say, "Start moving now." It hasn't worked yet. My day will come. I used to work for Adopt-A-Pet as one of those annoying guys you hate collecting money for the shelter on street corners. We always worked with partners in 3s or 4s covering all parts of the intersection, and one day when the workday ended and we were heading back to the van to head back home, I legitimately just felt something off and I grabbed the girl I was walking with when she was about to cross the street, in a crosswalk with a sign reading "Walk" and the light red. Just then around the corner sped an SUV and several police cruisers that would have absolutely pancaked her. She was quite grateful. I was telling a story to some friends and another friend wanted me to shut up, so he threw a closed Swiss Army knife at my head from a direction I wasn't looking. Right at that moment I was moving my hand in the "these are not the droids" motion, and I blocked it. I didn't even slow down the story. I finished it and just looked at him. Definitely not the best, but worst. Still, Jedi. So I was hanging out with a new friend, I was a freshman in high school, that I had just met that semester. She was funny, cute, and happy. Well, one day we were over at a friend's house, jumping on his trampoline, when we go in for some lemonade. We're sitting around laughing, and she gets a phone call. We hush up so she can hear. Her face goes from chill happiness to a straight face. She hangs up the phone. I look at her and say, "What's the matter? Your grandma die?" She couldn't hold it in. Tears burst, and she booked it out of the room. Her grandma had just died, and I made a joke about it. Impressive, but probably not cool. I can hypnotize chickens. Congratulations, you're the one superhero less impressive than Aquaman. But don't worry, if you become a Batman villain, you're still in the middle of the list in terms of awesomeness. Calendar Man, the Condiment King, and Armless Tiger Man ain't got nothing on you. I was driving in the car listening to XM radio. I told my friend what the next song was going to be, and it came on. I was pretty shocked myself. The summer I was 18, I was a lifeguard at a swimming pool. One day, me and my colleagues got wind that Sum 41 would be performing in a nearby city. I was an avid fan at the time, and so I made up my mind to go. Little did I know, 2 of the girls I worked with were also fans and managed to book off the date. We didn't have a lot of staff, and so because they booked off before me, their request was accepted and mine wasn't. A few weeks go by, and the day before the concert, the girls thought it would be in good taste to come and tease me about it. Ha 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 ha, have a good day at work tomorrow. Crap like that. I was annoyed, but a good enough sport not to take it to heart. So I answered, "You're going to get there and they won't even play. Something terrible is going to happen, just to rain on their parade." Sure enough, Sum 41 cancelled their performance due to the lead singer injuring his back. Next time we all worked together, it was as if I was personally responsible for the accident. In short, I accidentally cursed Sum 41. One time I perfectly predicted the Simpsons couch gag. It was the Monty Python foot one. Just as the couch comes into view, I say, "Foot," and like magic, the foot comes down, crushing the Simpsons family. A long time ago, in a galaxy far, far away, it was circa 1970. A bunch of us were doing some acid. I went to Longwood Gardens near Kennett Square, Pennsylvania. It's a huge former DuPont summer estate that's now a botanical showplace. The greenhouse is spectacular, with more plants from more different climates and environments than you can imagine. Taking green herb or whatever and going there was one of our favorite pastimes. It was just so pleasant and so cool. Anyway, there we were, 6 or 7 of us, both genders, wandering around all messed up, and we came upon a water fountain. It was like marble or something coming out of the marble or something wall. Everyone was thirsty as heck, but nobody could find the device for making the water come out. There was no handle, no button, no lever, nothing. Just a marble block with a stainless steel basin and a spout. Now, keep in mind we were all corked out of our gourds. I noticed that there was a metal round thing on the floor near the fountain. I surreptitiously slid my foot over it and said, "Watch this." I uttered some incantation as I waved my hands around in the air, then finished with a flourish, pointing to the water fountain as I applied just the slightest pressure to the thing under my foot. Water came shooting out of the fountain. I wish I could even begin to describe the reactions of my friends. It's impossible. I did it several more times and they got further and further mind-effed to the max. Talk about going bat-crap crazy. That's all. After a few times I revealed the secret. Watching their relief was almost as funny as watching their minds come unraveled. I was talking to the guy next to me in lecture one day, before class started, just chatting about how the class was going. Moments before, the guy in front of my seat propped his guitar against his seat and left the room. For the bathroom or vending machine, I assumed. It should be noted that I had the aisle seat. Paying no attention to his guitar and still talking to the dude next to me, I suddenly see something falling sideways in front of me and into the aisle. Without thinking, I quickly propped my leg up and caught his guitar on the lower portion of my shin. It would have hit the aisle stairs pretty hard. I put it back against his seat and gathered myself. He came back right as the lecture started, so I never mentioned it, which made it look like I do these kinds of things fairly often. I felt pretty ninja until I had to start taking notes. When I was about 10 years old, I once called and rolled 3 double sixes in a row in Monopoly. I think that's a 1 in 46,656 chance. In a game of Warhammer 40k, I witnessed 25 out of 26 dice rolled simultaneously, all coming up as 1s. Playing Super Smash Bros. With friends, 2v2, and my partner was out and I had 1 life left. 2v1 basically meant that there was no chance. I was playing with Captain Falcon, who I'm terrible at, and they had a combined 3 lives and were both historically far better than me. I said sarcastically, "How much do you want to bet I can win with just Falcon punches?" And 5 minutes later, I accepted my $20. Still to this day, don't know how I pulled it off. Dead lighters. When I say a fake prayer to the fake god of lighters very solemnly and then try to light it, 9 times out of 10, it ignites just the once to light my cigarette. Then when I hand it back to its frustrated owner, it doesn't work again. It sounds cool, but I've actually discovered it annoys the crap out of people. I was at a mall once, and there was this old bingo number picker machine thing on display. You know, you turn the crank and all of the balls with the bingo numbers shuffle around until one gets picked. A girl I was friends with was turning it and told me to guess a bingo number. I guessed the first number that came to mind. It was like I-20 or some crap like that. Sure enough, when the balls fall out of the cage and she reads it, it was I-20. She was amazed. 1 month later, I started dating her. In short, guessed a bingo number correctly. Resulted in wooing a girl. I was in Las Vegas with a few friends and we were walking around the casino floor looking for a game to play. We were passing a roulette wheel when I stopped and was staring at the number board of previous spins. I do this for about 2 to 3 spins, then quickly put down money on one of the thirds. The spin ends, I win $600 and casually keep walking. I speak the dialogue in movies and TV shows before I've heard it. So much of it is so predictable, setups that line up a mile away. Alright, bosses, what was on someone's CV that took you straight to hell yes or hell no? I had a resume from a potential interview candidate that listed his reason for leaving his last job as, "I found a buddy." No further explanation. You bet your sweet patootie I called him in for an interview. As a strategy to get an interview, it worked. The condensed story is that he found a body while walking the grounds at his job, checking to make sure all gated areas were secure and clear of debris. When he found the body, he called the police. He was fired because he broke internal reporting protocol. He was supposed to notify his immediate supervisor and not outside authorities. It was the supervisor's responsibility to call the police. Somebody sent over their CV written entirely in papyrus font from Microsoft Word. May as well have gone all out and used windings. I was hiring for a very competitive IT role last year, and one guy, who didn't have the best real-world experience, added a single QR code at the bottom of his CV. I scanned it, and it took me to an online portfolio, including a secure lab with simulations he'd run, allowing me to test scripts he'd written and also play around in his lab environment. Honestly, I've never seen anything like it. The guy got the job and has continued to be a great fit. I had someone hand me a resume with the HTML code of an adult website URL mixed in midway through. I guess he was watching naughty things while updating his resume and somehow dragged in a link. Guess he didn't proofread it. One resume read, "Expert in indoor horticulture." Indoor horticulture was in quotes. I received a resume from an applicant that included a letter of recommendation from his cat. The letter was hilarious and signed with a clip art paw print. I thought it was great and I wanted to bring him in, but the manager for the position wasn't crazy about it. I guess the point is, humor in an application can work from you, but it really depends on who's reading. Second language was Klingon. Too bad the guy was a total jerk during his interview. A guy put his bench, squat, and deadlift numbers on his personal skills section for a bar job. It spawned a long tradition of asking bartenders what they could bench when they applied for a job. I feel like it's a 70-30 chance of this either being the world's biggest D-bag or just having a terrific sense of humor. If he put that and then showed up as the world's scrawniest dude, it would be epic. Hiring for retail. 2 all-time favorites. Experienced at stalking the cooler. Responsible for closing paperwork after each shift. Except they left the F out of shift. Hiring a software engineer. Among his impressive list of skills were Notepad and WordPad. I have several CVs that will never make the cut. I keep them in a non-GDPR-proof binder hidden out of view. I work as an IT recruiter. Here are some of my favorites. Normal CV on the job site. Junior profile, 18 years old, just finished school. Pretty normal CV, except at the bottom he writes that he has a small member and he likes guys. The CV goes back and forth in the office. Eventually we decide to call him and ask why he put that on his CV. Turns out he had to make the CV for school, he left his PC open, and one of his classmates thought it was funny to add that to his profile. A CV with a picture of a man only in his boxers. No headshot, just his abs, boxers, and legs. We did not call that guy. Several CVs with people ranting against the government, religion, or anything else. Obvious proof of people's mental abilities. People writing things such as, "I will do the time for the crime I may or may not have committed." I haven't called any of those. So many cover letters with the wrong company on them. Recruiters will forget to change your name when sending you an in-mail. And applicants will forget to change the name when applying. We really need to get rid of mandatory cover letters. I'll still call them if their profile is decent, to be honest. And people being open about just putting their CV online so they can keep their unemployment benefits. At least they don't waste my time. I was working for a small digital agency and we were looking for designers and illustrators. General multi-skilled creative types. The boss wanders in with a sly grin and a big folder. It was from a guy who wanted a job. I came over and he started flicking through it. Page after page of raunchy cartoons. Lots of them furry type stuff. Women's chesty bits, butts, lips, figures intertwined, and lots of detailed musculature. So I was like, well, it's quite good for what it is, but what else is there? Is there another section? Nope, nothing else. Just a folder completely full of cartoon people that looked like they were straight from the page after Rule 33, and a bunch of anthropomorphized animals in compromising positions. He was not hired. It wasn't because of the cartoons, it was because it was all just those cartoons. Would have liked to see some commercial applications of illustration, or something showing he could work to requirements, or a variety of work showing different styles. This was like 15 years ago. I had one application dropped off by the applicant's mother. She told me, "If you hire him, you probably shouldn't trust him with money." I threw the application away after she turned around. I was hiring for a sales clerk position at my family bakery. "Hello, my good man. I would like to work at your factory." "I don't have a factory. Read the frickin' job description." I had a candidate who worked in counseling in the past, mostly with kids who'd been through trauma. They had a line on their resume that said, "Expert in child kidnapping." I had to at least give them an interview because I understood the intent, but the wording was just hilariously unfortunate. For those seeking clarity, he was an expert in kidnapping cases. No, he didn't get the job. Nice guy, but just not a good fit for the role. A guy said we had to hire him because he had a disability and it would be discrimination if we didn't. He wasn't hired. He called the CEO a few times to complain. We went through it at least 3 times over the course of multiple hirings. Guy submitted a resume claiming to be a ghostwriter for a local college. In lieu of a college degree, he listed the units he wrote assignments for and the average grades his clients got. My concerns were, where I live, many academic ghostwriters blackmail students post-submission for more money, or they send source materials to the lecturer. This in one of the world's top 50 universities. So I could probably expect similar crap in the workplace. Also, how can I trust them with sensitive information like patents or source code or internal IP or client information shared in confidence? Then there's the fact that 50% of the staff would hate this person right out the gate. They'd be miserable and my team would lose morale. If his background came up, it would also be an affront to an institution we often collaborated with. And I already had one butthole making the team's life a misery. Couldn't risk a second one. That's a significant red flag. We used to do a lot of rejection based on gaffes in people's CVs and cover letters. We'd reject on a faux pas. And then we realized we were chewing through good candidates who didn't have the money to use a professional writing service. If we're hiring for a developmental role, someone we expect needs to grow, then we shouldn't hold them to the standard we would expect after they've developed. We decided to start picking resumes for experience we think we want and ignore minor mistakes or odd formatting choices. We even re-interviewed people we think just had an off day. Now we have to do this because qualified candidates for our positions are fairly rare, so we have to be a little more flexible. Had a resume come in from a guy we fired about 2 years previously. Had a gap in his employment where the time was he had been with us, so it's not even like he didn't realize. The confidence to apply for a job you've been fired from. Man, that's something. I had a headhunter submit my resume to a place that I'd quit a year earlier. My old boss called me and asked, "You're not dumb enough to consider coming back here, are you?" Oh god, I can feel the internal cringe already. I mean, I've never been fired, but I have left jobs just because they were objectively bad and I hated my bosses. Even having them think that I was considering coming back is producing a full-body shudder. I work at an escape room. We once received a resume that consisted of a web page address protected by a password and 3 well-crafted riddles that we had to solve to get the password. We spent an hour doing it with 2 colleagues, and it included decrypting a code from a specific frame of Zodiac by David Fincher. It was simply amazing. Sadly, we weren't hiring at the time, and she had found another job when we started hiring again. Since I'm receiving a lot of answers, including pieces of advice on what we should have done, here's some important precisions. And no, we shouldn't have hired her to design a room. First, because we didn't have any room to design, our building was full, and it was more than a year until we needed to create a room. Second, because we already have designers. Remember, there's 13 of us plus the bosses, and we all have the skills she had. Third, because designing a room is a 3 to 4 week job, not a full-time one. Fourth, because it requires other skills than simply creating riddles, and neither you and I know if she had them. Fifth, because you simply don't hire a newbie to design your next 20 to 30 grand room that will be a sixth of your company revenue for the next 3 to 6 years. That's absolutely nonsensical. To the people saying we're idiots for not having hired her, you know nothing. This one was 14 pages. ETA, finance position with 5 to 10 years of experience. There's only so many different ways you can describe financial responsibilities. And summarizing is a skill. The guy never pitched for the interview. I got my first IT job because I'd put additional skills modifying Fallout 3 using Gek. I just loaded custom packs and got them to work, and they gave me a job miraculously, even though I was super underqualified. Was looking for a casual salesperson. This 18-year-old put a selfie of her which was taken in a car showing a lot of cleave. Not what I was looking for. I guess she was hoping I was a middle-aged single man. I have incredible attention to detail. I said that once in the email body, proceeded to forget to attach the CV. Bad emails. When interviewing for a professional position and your contact email is 69 smoker girl 420 blazing, it's a terrible way to start the resume. I had a funny typo on a resume I once reviewed. It read, assassinated the lead florist on site. Obviously, it was meant to say assisted. For years, I was applying for jobs with a high school qualification for art and design listed as fart and design. I got 2 jobs in that time and countless rejections. You can submit your own stories to be featured here on the channel. The story submission link is in the description below, and if you want to listen to some vibey music in the background, check out easymode, also linked below, and subscribe. Had a hairdresser apply for our position. The position was for a nurse. They said they wanted to try out the medical field. No, they didn't get the job. I once saw underachievements on a CV. Former world's youngest person. It made me laugh so much I gave them an interview. In the end, they didn't sell themselves well enough to get the role, but it brightened my morning of filtering. Not so much the content of the application, but what was on the application. A handprint. It was for a food handling position, and he was grungy enough to leave a print from where he held down the paper to write on it. Instant no. Looking back, yeah, there was a chance he'd have been fine, we could have taught proper hand washing and all that, but at the time we declined to grant an interview. When every referee has a sentence or two about how we shouldn't call them because they parted on bad terms or it had been a while. Some applicants listed referees who, when called, barely remembered working with the person. I'm surprised he has me listed as a reference, since he tried to sue me earlier this year, is sadly a true story. I was on a hiring committee for a college instructor. The candidate was asked to provide a statement of commitment to the college and its mission. An entire paragraph was plagiarized, copied, and pasted from a website. I noticed the writer's voice drastically changed, so I pasted a sentence into Google and immediately found the source. He did not get an interview. I once received a resume written in size 60 font. It was just 1 page. I was interviewing people for an IT company. Guy put experience with SCSI on his resume. For non-techies, SCSI is a type of hard drive pronounced as he wrote it, but never in a million years written that way. I was working at a job and my roommate wanted to apply. On the application, he wrote, "Can make 3-minute ramen in 2 minutes 50. He got the interview. Hey, that's worthwhile. Even as a guy who can cook well, I still feel like making literally anything takes at least twice as long as was advertised in the recipe. A few years ago, I bought an already working franchise location in the next town over, which is a very small and quiet town. The previous owner let go of his employees with a severance, so I didn't have to take over her contract. Being my new and only store, I decided to work by myself until getting settled and hire help if I seemed to need it. The first day I opened the store, about an hour after opening, the former employee comes by to introduce herself and to drop a resume. I tell her that I'll consider it since she worked there for about 5 years, mostly on her own. The previous owner was not a hands-on boss, and I put her CV in a drawer. During the rest of the day, I noticed people standing on the sidewalk looking in, and after doing that, they came in and made a purchase. After 4 or 5 people did this, I asked a woman what made her look before coming in, and she said, "Oh, I wouldn't have come in if that red-headed C-word was still working here." Needless to say, I put an "Under New Management" sign on the door using the back of the C-word's CV, and nobody else looked before coming in that day. Recruiter here, I have a few. A resume saying, "Hire me, lol." A video interview with another candidate. She was in a hospital bed and just gave birth to her son prior to her interview. Hired. Another video interview, the guy was chugging a Tallboy Coors Light. Had a kid applying to work at a Sam Goody as a stock boy write that he was a petroleum transference engineer for Exxon at his last job. His job was pumping gas. I hired him on the spot. That sounds exactly like something I'd write. I'm not even unironic about it. You should see the crap I wrote on my one. When I was 16 and looking for a job, my only other job before that had been paperboy. I wrote, "News Media Distributor," or some crap, and wrote bullet points underneath. "Liaison with clientele within the local area on a daily basis," and "used algorithms to compute the quickest supply chain route." More recently, I was a stevedore or dock rat or dock willy, docker, longshoreman, whatever the hell you want to call it. I wrote port operative. I've written so much crap, but maybe that's why I can't get a job. Once I received a resume that had raid leader for World of Warcraft in top guild of a server. This was about 9 years ago. The other hiring managers laughed their butts off and said this guy was a joke, and they all dismissed him. Me, I asked the guy to come in for an interview, and he did pretty well, and I hired him. The reason I brought the guy in for the interview was because I'm an avid WoW player at that time, and I knew the crap that leaders had to go through. Trying to get a large number of people together, coordinate resources and rewards, getting guides together and telling people to up their healing or DPS and not stand in fire. All done virtually via vent and forum postings, meaning you never met these guild members in person. You need some great leadership skills and project management. Also, at the time I was dealing with a lot of people off-site, so I thought this guy would be a good fit. 9 years later, I've left the company now, and the WoW guy I hired turned out to be great, especially in the last 9 years when corporations decided that working from home and virtual meetings were the way to go, to cut costs. His skill as a raid leader translated very well with remote project management and is now the manager of the hiring managers that laughed at his resume. This was at a Fortune 500 financial company. In short, if you stand in that fire, I'm not healing your butt. I once wrote stuff like, able to plug in USB on first try, and can do up to 10 push-ups before going into sleep mode in the additional skills section. They later told me I was invited because they wanted to see if I could really do the first one. I applied with a cover letter, the first paragraph of which entirely detailed my favorite drinks, and the subject line, "Copywriter, will work for beer," to a job I was underqualified for. It caught the eye of the headhunter for the ad agency and was enough to get me an interview. Shortly after that, I was hired and ended up working there for a few years. I remember writing that letter and feeling frustrated because I wasn't hearing back from any of the places I was applying. So I said, screw it, I'm going to write one that's more me. I should note that this probably wouldn't work everywhere, but it fit with the culture of that agency. Plus, the job listing said that I'd be working for beer brands as clients and that free beer was a perk of the job. I was an AV engineering team lead for a startup for a while. A couple of years ago, I was hiring to fill about 30 slots of a very basic AV tech position. I had about 20 applicants at the time, so if you were reasonably competent, you were in. I got one resume and cover letter through our website from a guy who I will henceforth refer to as the screw-up. Every third word on this thing was spelled incorrectly, punctuation was optional, and spacing was randomized. Thinking, this can't be real. I called one of the guy's references. Oh boy, did I ever get an earful from a grumpy business owner. The screw-up in question was so much of a screw-up that he was applying for positions in my area because he was effectively blacklisted from just about every job site and labor company in his hometown, a medium-sized US city with a very, very large audiovisual job market. The reference told me that he'd told the screw-up not to hand his name or number out as a reference, because the screw-up had caused more than $200,000 of damages to the reference company's equipment the previous year. He went on to name, correctly and from memory, the other references that the screw-up had likely listed on his resume. Friendly competition of the reference, and he told me that they'd all say the same thing. So I called around. The screw-up was apparently quite the liability. We did not end up hiring him, but I made some new business friends in another city. We've since collaborated on a couple of larger conference gigs that hit their city first and then our city afterwards, so thanks, screw-up. Wait, so if the guy did $200,000 worth of damages in the one job and had wreaked similar havoc all over his hometown, it's not out of the question that he caused $500,000 in destruction, possibly crossing over the $1 million mark depending on how many other jobs he'd held that he hadn't listed. I mean, I kind of want to observe a guy this bad at doing everything. From a safe distance, of course, behind bulletproof glass. Not hiring, but one time a guy had excessive pickle tickling. We've toned it down, use your imagination, viewers, listed as one of his main hobbies. Not recommended unless you want to hire for a product tester in certain branches. We did check up. He had his CV proofread by one of his friends. Always proofread your friend's proofreading, folks. Hired for a junior UX role. An applicant's CV header was, "Your bubbly UX designer," which was good enough to warrant an interview. In the interview, when we asked what their dream job was if they were in a completely different area, they answered, "Juventus manager." We knew she was a keeper. Someone had spelled "of" incorrectly on their entire CV. OV. I almost wanted to interview them just to see how they remembered to breathe. I know a guy who put that he had a black belt in full contact origami. Well, it is said that jiu-jitsu is the gentle art of folding clothes while people are still in them. I've seen resumes that didn't have a name on them. For the love of God, triple-check the spelling of any names. The number of CVs that simply go straight in the bin because they can't spell my or my company's name correctly is too damn high. Someone sent us a 20-minute long video on why they wanted to work with us. Not hired, it was just too much. Another applicant explained her family situation honestly in the cover letter. She fit our office culture as well as her amazing skills, and we hired her. I saw one resume state that for work experience, hacker, at the internet. They also stated they've been both hired and fired for hacking various things, and have never been convicted of a computer crime. What do you think is proof that we live in a simulation? I don't know if this is just me, but I often have a boring dream of myself in a classroom or on a bus, wake up and forget it pretty quickly. Then, many years later, I'm on a bus or in a classroom, and I see something or hear something that I saw or heard in that dream. Then I suddenly remember that dream and I get really confused. It's happened about 10 times in my life so far. I know the exact moment that I would call BS on reality. I was out for supper with my mother, grandmother, and sister, and after we'd mostly finished eating, there was a moment where my sister and I, across from one another, witnessed the same thing. It was a mundane dinner and mundane conversation, yet a moment occurred that would shock my sister and I. While my mother and grandmother were talking, there was an instance where a white plate between my sister and I shook on the table. It had been clean previously, but post-table shake, a solitary French fry appeared on that plate. At first I thought I was the only person witnessing this bizarre reappearing act, however post-appearing, I locked eyes with my sister who had seen the same thing. We still talk about that stupid frickin' fry to this day. Why physics appears to operate under different rules depending on whether you're looking at very big things or very small things. If it's a simulation, they simply faked the big things to save processing power, which is why quantum physics doesn't fit neatly in our understanding of the universe and likely why we're detecting dark matter. When your pen gets lost as soon as it hits the floor, and then reappears right there after some time. In college, I couldn't find my favorite lipstick. It usually lived on my dresser, which admittedly also had a bunch of other crap on it at that point. So I took everything off the dresser, item by item, and moved it to my bed as I looked for the missing tube of lipstick. It wasn't there. Put everything back on the dresser, item by item, and then left the room. Came back a little while later, and the lipstick was sitting by itself right by the edge. Yeah, the physics engine and pop-in of some of the items in our world really does seem to go haywire between the different patches we get for the great computer game that we call life, doesn't it? In seriousness, I think there's a non-zero chance that someone borrowed your lipstick. Well, yesterday, while driving with my daughter in the car, she says, "Dad, I'm starting to feel that this whole human thing isn't real." So I guess that would be confirmed as my first hint. Wait, round about how old is she where she's already either having an existential crisis or contacting the devs? Sometimes you get out of your house and walk past the same people a lot of times. Like you're going to the market and walk past a dude walking the opposite direction. Then you leave the market a couple of minutes and walk past the same guy again in the opposite direction. This crap happens a lot with me, and it's like a ton of people at the same time. It makes me feel like there aren't enough models of NPCs to throw around, so the Matrix just uses a bunch of the same people. You could say the strict laws of physics that govern our reality. If we were in, say, a video game, we'd eventually start wondering why the rules seem absolutely rigid and mathematical. Maybe the speed of light is just the speed limit for transmitting information within the network of our simulation. Also, there seems to be limited resolution due to Planck's constant. Our graphics card must be frickin' insane though. Our render distance is essentially infinite. The quantum eraser. Quantum physics as a whole feels like a huge developer shortcut. Things only exist in a definitive state when they're interacted with. Kind of like a graphics card only rendering things when your character is looking at them. When you run into someone you don't know and you both just stare at each other thinking, "You look familiar, do I know you?" And then ask a million questions trying to figure it out and come to the conclusion that you don't in fact know each other. Then you walk away still wondering why that person looked so familiar. So, at my first job after college, I ran into this guy in the smoking area and he said, "Hey, how's it going?" I knew him right off the bat, but I'm absolutely horrible with names. Plus, I couldn't quite place him. Did I know him from high school? College? Friend of a friend? Academic conference? Someone I interviewed for the paper? So I talked with him for a few minutes, waiting for the guy to drop some sort of hint to trigger my memory. Finally, he looks me straight in the eye and says, "You don't remember me, do you?" And I was so embarrassed, but I freely admitted it and asked him to remind me. He gets this stunned look and says, "Oh crap, really? Because I've been waiting for you to say something to remind me. We've known each other 22 years and have been a couple for 20 years, and been married for 12 years. We still don't know when we met the first time. We have a couple of guesses, but don't know for sure. The weird part is that we figured out that there were multiple times we should have met, but didn't. We knew a lot of the same people, but at different times. The guy I went to college with was someone he knew in junior high. His best friend's girlfriend shared a high school class with me. I was acquaintances with a girl he dated just before he enlisted in the Navy, which was right about the time I moved into the area. The oddest one was that we should have met as young kids. We should have met when I was in first grade and he was third grade, because we both qualified for an enrichment program that year. But my family was going to move later that year, so my parents kept me out. So yeah, we know the second time we met, but not the first, and should have met earlier, but kept missing. Déjà vu. It's similar to déjà vu, but it's where you've dreamt of a future moment. It's weird, and for me it hasn't been useful. But one moment I'll be experiencing life and just know what's going to happen because I saw it in a dream. I'll even know about my futile attempts to change it from the dream. It only lasts a couple of minutes at most, and it's mundane moments, but it is freaky. Before cell phones, I accidentally misdialed a person's number and got the correct person at somebody else's house, with the wrong number being 3 numbers off. I talked to her for about a minute, and she asked me how I got her uncle's number. I said I didn't have his number, I dialed hers, and we both fell deadly silent thinking about how bizarre it was. The observer effect in quantum mechanics. When something is in multiple states at the same time and when you measure or watch it, you force it into a state. It just looks like a computer saving resources by not loading useless crap. I get that there's probably something behind it, and it's not actually the fact that we're watching it that does something, but if tomorrow we were able to prove that we live in a simulation, then this would have been a hint. That thing where you go into a room for something and then forget why. Like a sim who had their action cancelled. That can't be for no reason. That was someone in our simulation cancelling our action. I mean, my explanation for this has always just been that I'm a dum-dum, but if you think that your brain is unassailable and would rather literally find any other explanation for an attack of the stupids, be my guest. The following commenter has a suggestion. That's actually because your brain compartmentalized thoughts based on location. New room equals new train of thought equals what the heck did I walk into this room for? I don't think we should be answering this question. It's clearly a bug survey. Nice try, simulation developers. Dreaming. How it could be a gateway to another universe or version of yourself, and how do we manage to forget those dreams, especially the important ones? In high school, I downloaded an app that would wake you up when you were dreaming so you could write them down while they're fresh in your memory. After a few months, I lost that phone and forgot about the app. I recently downloaded the app to find out that all of the stories were kept through my account. I couldn't have told you a single dream I wrote down in there because I completely forgot. But the moment I read my own stories, written in a groggy, barely awake grammar, I was immediately teleported into the exact scenarios of the dreams. I could all of a sudden vividly picture the smallest detail of the dream simply after reading a few words. It was wild. Often when I learn about something new that I've never heard about, all of a sudden it starts appearing randomly in some TV show I'm watching or a news or Reddit article. They should really fix the targeted ad algorithms to make it less obvious that I'm living in a simulation. Gotta say, the karma system for real life is broken as frick. I think the clearest sign is the need to sleep. Gotta reset the system or it slows down, has glitches and deteriorates because it can't clear out the useless junk and it runs out of space. Extreme synchronicity. People write it off as coincidences, but I sometimes don't. Some people get sick for no reason, and some people who should be sick because of how they live seem super healthy. Millions of years of evolution and we can still accidentally bite our own tongue? That's some bullcrap, man. Black holes could be a glitch. Black holes are the deletion program of the simulation. Periods. Let's leave a trail of blood for predators to follow at the same time that I'm curling up into a fetal position from cramps. Super suspicious. Sounds like it was made by the same people who put Sims in a pool and removed the ladder so that they drown. Children who are convinced that they've lived before and know sometimes verifiable facts about the person they think they were. The dual slit experiment. Basically, light acts like a wave when you look at it. But if you look really closely at light, you see it's not a continuous wave, but made of teeny tiny particles called photons. These photons, when there's loads of them, affect each other so that they act in waves. Seems simple. However, when you fire photons one at a time at a piece of card with two slits in it, they still act like they're being affected by lots of other photons around them. So whoever designed our simulation wanted to model light using waves, but it was too complex, so they made photons instead. The same way a curve in a video game is actually made of square pixels. They never figured we'd get smart enough to experiment on individual pixels. As Neil deGrasse Tyson likes to say, if we ever discover that we can simulate the universe, then we're more likely than not living in a simulation ourselves. My wife. How can someone be absolutely perfect for me and I met her by mere coincidence? The fact that the moon and the sun can just about perfectly eclipse each other. What are the odds that the moon and the sun would be the sizes they are and distances from the Earth that they are to allow that to happen? You can submit your own stories to be featured here on the channel. The story submission link is in the description below. And if you want to listen to some vibey music in the background, check out easymode, also linked below, and subscribe. Being depressed despite any reason. I have a perfect family, I'm annoyingly optimistic, I do everything, and yet here I am. It's like someone is just pushing the be more sad button for craps and giggles. The Gates of Hell. It's a crater that's been burning for over 40 years straight. I'm pretty sure it has something to do with it being in a desert and surrounded by gases, but the fact that it's been like that for more than 40 years is insane. There's also Centralia, Pennsylvania, a town where they accidentally lit underground coal seams on fire, and the entire town had to be condemned because it turned the air toxic, and streets would collapse with no warning, and fire would just erupt from the ground unpredictably. It's supposedly going to burn for at least another 250 years. Like, come on. The devs weren't exactly subtle with that one. Collapsing ground, spouts of fire, poison gas clouds, that's literally a generic video game level. Look around the room that you're in. Choose any random object within the room. What does it feel like to lick that object? You know what it feels like to have licked it, but have you ever? Single biggest glitch in my book. I'm pretty sure I actually have licked most of them. Whenever you're driving down a straight road on a hot day and it has a road mirage that looks like parts of the road haven't rendered yet. Appendixes. Screw those things. Haven't they discovered that it's necessary now? The farm for your gut bacteria? Okay, I'm learning that it's not necessary, but it might be beneficial. The reason it could be beneficial is up for some debate. Constant speed of light. Quantized space, time, and energy. Slowing down time as speed increases. No information out of event horizons. Increasing quantization at higher energy levels. I'm convinced we're in a simulation already. The year 2020. From start to finish. There's no way that this isn't someone testing mods and messing with us all. Somebody's playing Plague Incorporated with our lives. As an aside, the narrator has been considering buying that game. Anyone able to testify whether it's any good? Maybe I can see if the little people react as stupidly as the rest of us did during the pandemic. Every field of study, including science, runs on assumptions that we can't prove, and no matter how much research we do, we end up with loose ends. For example, we can't prove that the laws of physics have always been the same. We just have to assume that they've always been that way when we run our models. My buddy, who just finished a PhD in material science, likes to say that when you go deep enough into research, you find out that everything we do, all the structures and theories and everything else, is resting on clouds of uncertainty. The Bermuda Triangle. Why has everyone disappeared there? Literally some of the busiest shipping lanes in the world, with thousands more pleasure craft, commercial trawlers, and private and commercial flights traverse the area routinely, but yeah, sure, everyone disappears there. When street lights shine through leaves, the shadows on the grounds are perfect grid patterns, like poorly rendered shading effects. The Mandela effect, a phenomenon where a large group of people share the same false memory of an event or detail. This collective misremembering often involves specific, vivid details that contradict documented reality. The term was coined after many people recalled Nelson Mandela dying in prison in the 1980s, despite his actual death in 2013. The idea or concept of needing to prove our self-worth. Why do people have to prove their self-worth in the world? Isn't it enough just to exist? It's a strange phenomenon. It fuels a lot of chaos that has existed or is existing in the world, and it makes absolutely no sense. Missing items like keys or tools. Those things you're positive are there, but aren't when you look, and then reappear after you go back to look. Character glitches, also known as seizures. Murphy's Law. Everything that can go wrong will go wrong, but it only applies when you think about it before doing a thing. It's like a secret cheat code in a game, except it's the opposite. Chameleons. Way too many plot holes there. If they can change color, how do we know that they're green? What's up with their tiny little hands? And don't even get me started on their nightmare tongues. Putting something in one spot, going to get it and it's not there, fast forward days, weeks or hours, and now it's there again. I don't know about you guys, but this happens to me a lot. I don't think that I'm that scatterbrained because I specifically remember putting, say, my glasses on the bedside table. Then they aren't there, I go look all over the house, come back into the bedroom, and there they are, on the bedside table. Abraham Lincoln was elected to Congress in 1846. John F. Kennedy was elected to Congress in 1946. Abraham Lincoln was elected president in 1860. John F. Kennedy was elected president in 1960. The names Lincoln and Kennedy each contain 7 letters. Both were particularly concerned with civil rights. Both wives lost their children while living in the White House. Both presidents were shot on a Friday. Both were shot in the head. Kennedy's secretary, last name Lincoln, warned him not to go to Dallas. Both were assassinated by Southerners. Both were succeeded by Southerners. Both successors were named Johnson. Andrew Johnson, who succeeded Lincoln, was born in 1808, and Lyndon Johnson, who succeeded Kennedy, was born in 1908. John Wilkes Booth was born in 1839, and Lee Harvey Oswald was born in 1939. Both assassins were known by their 3 names. Both names are comprised of 15 letters. Booth ran from the theater and was caught in a warehouse. Oswald ran from a warehouse and was caught in a theater. Booth and Oswald were both assassinated before their trials. Fog is just a draw distance limitation when the majority of memory is being used elsewhere in the simulation. The speed of light. I mean, a constant? That makes no frickin' sense, and honestly probably has more to do with the simulation maximum processing speed. High-pitched ringing in your ears. Or is it just your brain syncing with the cloud? Déjà vu. Any explanation that has been offered sounds a whole lot like science pulling the "that's not a glitch, it's a feature" routine. Black holes are definitely a hole in the map. What's through those things? We haven't got the faintest idea, but once you go through, good luck coming back. Australia. It's the first content of a DLC we never got, and now it just feels off somehow. It was going to be the one you play when you've beaten the rest and are growing bored. The Fermi paradox. The following are some of the facts that together serve to highlight the apparent contradiction. There are billions of stars in the Milky Way similar to the Sun. With high probability, some of these stars have Earth-like planets. Many of these stars, and hence their planets, are much older than the Sun. If the Earth is typical, some may have developed intelligent life long ago. Some of these citizens may have developed interstellar travel, a step humans are investigating now. Even at the slow pace of currently envisioned interstellar travel, the Milky Way galaxy could be completely traversed in a few million years. And since many of the stars similar to the Sun are billions of years older, the Earth should have already been visited by extraterrestrial civilizations, or at least their probes. However, there's no convincing evidence that this has happened. We're in a simulation that more advanced humans are running to see if and how the humans in the simulation, us, find out that they're in a simulation. Then the humans that made our simulation can use that to determine if they are in a simulation, just like deGrasse Tyson said. Simception. Not seeing baby pigeons. Like, where the frick are they at? I'm sad to break it to you, but they exist. And they are ugly as hell. I've had 5 pigeon babies hatch near my balcony. They're nasty. I didn't believe birds were real, but yeah. You know what? The narrator is not at all surprised that the offspring of the most annoying bird to grace my gutters is ugly as hell. Just goes to show that feathered rats have no redeeming features. Nobody likes you, pigeons. I've had some real weird coincidences in my life, like statistically unbelievable. I was born in a really small town and moved 700 miles away when I was 5 years old. I grew up with a girl that was born a day before me in the same hospital, and we didn't realize we were from the same town. My bus driver in middle school was from the county over. I ended up becoming best friends with a guy I skated with in college and high school who randomly dropped our hometown's name. Later on, maybe 12 years later when I was bartending, I was giving a coworker crap for his northern accent, and then he told me our hometown's name again. I ended up doing AmeriCorps or volunteer stuff, and I wanted to go as far away as possible. 17-hour drive over 1,000 miles. Turns out the county name was the same as my birthplace. There's some other stuff with numbers, but it's zip codes and I'm going to keep that private. Doppelgangers. Enough said. I feel like I really need to light up some green herb before reading all of the answers here. The never-ending lightning strikes that keep happening in that one town in Venezuela. They've been going on for centuries. It's called Catatumbo lightning. When you can't sleep at all and you try everything to sleep but seem unable to, then that means that the sleep servers are full and you've got to wait until the servers give you a spot. The platypus. It's just so different than any other animal module. Lucid dreaming. When you subscribe, make sure to hit the bell to turn on notifications. Put the playlist on in the background to finish listening to all the stories, or if you want some vibey music to put on in the background, check out easymode. If you like Am I the Genius, give Am I the Jerk a shot. Everything linked in the description.